All right, looks like we are live, and I want to welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and we are here for this exciting program on human evolution. On Standing for Truth, we defend the truth of biblical creation. We also host some awesome guests on the program. And today it is a privilege to have Dr. Peter Line for this important program. Dr. Peter Line is going to help us comprehensively examine the hominin fossil record. We will be discussing the icons of human evolution, such as the Australopithecines, Neanderthals, Erectus, Homo naledi, and more. Dr. Peter Line, thank you so much for giving us your time for this show.
No problem.
Now, what I'm going to do before we get into a comprehensive examination of the hominin fossil record, Peter, is give you a formal introduction for anybody who might be unfamiliar with who you are. And so
Sure.
Peter's undergraduate majors were in biophysics and instrumental science. After this, he completed master's and PhD degrees in the area of neuroscience, focusing on brain electrophysiology, and spent over a decade involved in such research. Subsequently, he worked as a university lecturer, teaching in the area of anatomy and physiology for over a decade. Peter has been interested in the creation evolution issue ever since becoming a Christian, as evolution was a stumbling block to him believing God's word was true. He has had a particular interest in the so-called hominid fossils for many years and has published several articles on the subject. Peter, I have read through most of your articles. You have done some great work on this topic, and so I am thrilled to have you here to discuss the topic of human evolution. And so, Peter, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. It's still early here, but 24 past 8, but we're doing quite fine. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
It's the perfect way to start the day. Talk about the Australopithecines and Neanderthal and the hominids in general. And so what I'll do is ask you our first question for this morning for you, this afternoon for me. And so you're in the future, Dr. Peter Line. And to our audience, we will be taking audience questions. So this is going to be very interactive. Peter has slides, got a presentation, and so I'll be asking my own questions. You guys are going to be asking your own questions. I've had questions that have been sent in to me. And so again, there's going to be more than enough to talk about, and we want this to be as thorough as possible. And so we definitely want to discuss all the relevant points. So please just make sure you're tagging me if you have a question or a challenge or an objection, as we do get a healthy mix of critics and non-critics. And so please tag me either at Donny or at Standing for Truth, and that way I won't miss your question. And so the first question for tonight, Peter, what is the hominin fossil record, and why is it important to the overall origins debate?
Well, I guess the hominin fossil record, it used to be called the hominid, but now it's called the hominin fossil record, is sort of fossils that evolutionists believe are more closely related to humans than basically chimpanzees. So it derives back from when they believe there was a last common ancestor, and then there was a fork in a road. One group went to chimpanzees, the other group led to humans and dead ends and things like that. So basically the hominid fossil record includes humans and anything since that hypothetical split, which they believe occurred maybe 6 million years, 7 million years or something like that ago. So what was the other part of the question?
And with the hominin fossil record overall, why is it so important to the origins debate? Why is it a controversy?
Okay. Well, the thing is, it's used. Well, it is my opinion. Let me give you an example. I remember years ago when I was just started studying at university, or was studying there. I was in a library, and I was flicking some pages in I think it was it Nature magazine or something like that. And I saw one of the librarians, and it was open on a page, and there's some skulls there. I don't know if it was a robust Australopithecine or some robust Chinese human skull, but the guy's eyes nearly popped out, and almost like he was sold on the idea of evolution just by looking at that. And to me, that highlights the propaganda value of it. It's not. I don't believe you can prove or disprove evolution by comparing skulls, but they use it as propaganda because evolution is very weak in other areas. To me, it's disproven based on molecular biology, genetics, and probability. It just can't ever happen. There's too many things. The waiting time problem for mutations to be fixed in the genome, carrying new information, it just would take forever and a day. While at the same time, the genome is deteriorating quite rapidly. So it's sort of be it's like stacking a pile of bricks while it's falling apart a lot faster. So it would never work. And also you have the irreducible complexity of biochemical systems, machines, nanomachines, and from my experience, the human brain, most of all, almost the infinite functional complexity of the brain. If you have, I taught neuroanatomy course there for about a decade, and you just the circuitry there, it's just overwhelming. The interconnectedness, the millions and millions of connections here, there, everywhere. To think that could be put together by blind intelligence, by blind non-intelligent process, without purpose in mind or anything like that, to me is that it's absurd. And then you're not even talking about the mind, which is non-physical. How does that get selected for? So for me, So basically, but for me, this is the evolutionists used the hominid fossil record as a selling point, and that's why it's important to have basically answers to what are these creatures, or what how to sort out what it is.
Well said, Peter. The fossil record is low quality data, and as you've put it, without an adequate mechanism in genetics to take ape-like creatures into humans over time, any of these reconstructions that we see based on these fossils lacks explanatory power. It's just a presupposition imposed on the genetic data and not actually a conclusion from it directly. And so that's a great point. Well, how about we shift into specifically the Australopithecines? We hear a lot of talk about the Australopithecines.
But we're back. Yeah, what I'll do a quick before I'll get onto it. But on that point, I just got from the slide. I'll just I don't know if you can see here. I'll just do a couple of points on. I think it's important for the audience to realize about the objectivity of and so can you see the screen there for the search for truth?
Yes.
So basically Roger Lewin is an evolutionist in books Bones of Contention. He talks about this, that that basically as a common fantasy, basically mostly by the scientific profession itself promulgated, that in search for objective truth, data dictate conclusions. And I'll go on to the yellow bit, but data are just as often molded to fit preferred conclusions. And the interesting question then becomes, what shapes the preference of an individual or group of researchers, not what is the truth? And that's what we're dealing with here. It's not really so much a search for the truth as people you have a bias and a preference for a truth, and so they want evolution to be true, so they're going to interpret everything in that. And so basically you have to be wary about these sort of data being interpreted to fit preferred conclusions when you hear about all these missing link or ape man claims or fossil things like that. And so to give you an illustration, you have these elephant hurling statements Like I thought a good example is by Tim White, is a well-known paleoanthropologist, and he writes in one back in 2006. There are now tens of thousands of hominid fossils in museums around the world supporting our current knowledge of human evolution. The pattern that emerges from this vast body of hard evidence is consistent across thousands of investigations. All models, all myths involving singular instantaneous creation of modern humans fail in the face of this evidence. Now, at a time he penned those words, I saw some special on TV, and where they said if you gather up every piece of fossil, then it would barely fill up the back of a ute or pickup truck or whatever. So it's not like you're doing like endless piles of bone, but you've got a reasonable sample. Now, it's not the tens of thousands. That doesn't worry me at all, but it's the implications that it supports human evolution. And I believe that is not true. And as another evolutionist, James Green, have famously written, everybody knows fossils are fickle. Bones will sing any song you want to hear. And the thing is, you can basically, people look at the same bones and have very different interpretation, even evolutionists. And so basically, and so no one denies the existence of the fossil. It's the interpretation of the fossil. So you can claim you have all these thousands of fossils supporting human evolution, but it's very hollow if basically someone using different worldview lenses can argue the opposite. So basically it just cancels out. So these elephant hurdling statements, they're not very productive. And a couple of more quotes there. Sorry, a quote by Martin Meredith in Born in Africa. As the new science of paleoanthropology developed over the years, it was to become a common feature that scientists examining the same evidence reached diametrically opposed conclusion. So again, just echoing what I'm saying there. And so basically, so my thing is, if it really was scientific and they were concerned about the truth, and given all the different opinions of evolution or evolutionists, why is not non-evolutionist interpretation of these fossils, why aren't they welcome? And that's the key. I think that's the key there. Why is it so? Even whatever field it is, why is it intelligent design not welcome? When the evidence is so overwhelming, particularly in molecular biology and things like that, in the human brain, but it's not welcome. So you're dealing with something else here, some other phenomena. All right. Now, what I'll do now is, you're still with me there, Donny?
Yes, it's coming through great, Peter.
Okay. I'm just going in here to basically go to the Australopithecines now. Okay. So that's so we'll get on to the Australopithecines. So the Australopithecines are basically, there's generally two types. There's a robust and gracile types, and here's an example of the black skull. That's a robust Australopithecines. They there's generally this one is affiliated with Australopithecus aphipicus. Now, some of these names, I don't know if I pronounce them correctly or not. They're quite awkward. But there's three types the evolutionists classified as robust Australopithecines. So there's aphipicus, there's Australopithecus boisei, and there's Australopithecus robustus. And some put them in a separate genus called Paranthropus. Generally, they're considered an evolutionary dead end because their skulls are obviously, there's nothing human-like about that skull. So, in fact, there's nothing human-like about any of the Australopithecine skulls. Okay, so here is a gracile Australopithecine. So that's known as Mrs. Plaz, and that's from South Africa, Australopithecus africanus. Okay, so basically just by looking at it, you don't have these kind of really robust features. And here's a male, presumed to be male Australopithecus afarensis skull. Okay, now the one which when you talk about afarensis is Lucy, but the skull there, that it was only in small pieces, a bit believed to be a female. But this one, there's other ones that are more complete, and so this is again a more complete skull. You can see again, there's nothing human-like about it there. You know, in many ways, that should probably end the argument, because in terms of Australopithecines, you know, ape men, by looking at that, no, their skulls were apish. I prefer to call them extinct apish primates, because even as some evolutionists like Charles Oxon, I believe they were very different from apes, but also very different from humans. So a different group altogether. So I don't necessarily put them as apes in a sense that belong with the existing existing apes today, but they're a different group, a bit like monkeys are not apes, but they're a primate group, an apish primate group. And so I see the Australopithecine as an extinct apish primate group. I tend to look at them like that. But the thing is that all the commotion is about locomotion. To me, it's not that much of an issue, because if you look at what does the Bible says about locomotion in primates, you know, it's a big blank. So even if you had Australopithecine that walk like a human, then my reaction would be, well, that's interesting, but so what? You know, God created it once, can't He create it again? The design for the pelvis, the legs, or whatever. Although I don't, so for me, it's not a big issue, and bipedalism, but it doesn't really show that they do actually walk like, though evolution say so, it doesn't really, the evidence tend to not indicate that at all. If you actually look at it more closely. And so I have the pelvises here, but sometimes so you can see here, if I go fast forward here, I'll show you so we're talking about here's the so I can show you what I'm talking about. So you have on the screen here, to the right is the Lucy pelvis. Now that's from bone clones. So I don't know how accurately that's been reconstructed, but you know, but probably a few reconstruction make it look more ape-like. So bear that in mind. And to the left is a human, and to the middle is a chimpanzee pelvis. So basically, I think everyone can see there that it's not a chimpanzee pelvis, and that's one of the reasons that I don't classify these as basically apes. It's more a different group altogether, but it's not a human pelvis either. And so let's go back and look at some of the arguments in terms of the whole argument is, did it walk like a human? Now, I believe even existing apes walk bipedally to some degree. It varies, and that's what I believe. And there were even apes if you use the evolutionary timeline, there are apes that even evolutionists claim, apes millions of years that lived before Lucy that they claim walk bipedally. So basically, it's not even unique to the Australopithecines. So you have if we get time, I can show you some of these claims. And so basically, bipedalism is to me, it's not an issue per se, because even apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas all walk bipedally. Some more awkward than the others. They're actually the most bipedal ape is the lesser ape, the gibbon. Now that what it is designed for, it seems like in the trees, it walks along branches. We've got hand assisted arboreal bipedalism, so it walks on the branches and then uses the hands to assist it, and it can get access to food resources that way and things like that. And they seldom go to the ground, but if they do go to the ground, they can actually run bipedally, gibbons. So basically, so it's not to me, it's not that big a thing. And then you have these apes supposed to be living millions of years before Lucy in the evolutionary timeline. Some claim they were habitual bipeds, as well as tree dwellers and stuff like the climbing trees. And so basically, it's not such a big deal. But looking at the pelvis here, or the claim. So let's look at the pelvis. Now they have on the I'll just go here to. You can see here that's top of the sacrum. So the pelvis is made up of two hip bones, the os coxa, which are known as the pelvic girdle, and then you have the pelvis. So that's and the sacrum. So the sacrum is a bit in the middle, which is part of the vertebral column, the spine. You've joined the two hip bones, and that becomes the pelvis. Okay. Now you have on top of the top of the sacrum, you have this thing called the body. And you can see it on the left there. Now, what I found is that I think I'll go to a slide. Let's see if I have it on a slide. Is that in Australopithecus afarensis, basically the cross-sectional area of that body is very, very small, and so basically, as you can say, and also the vertebra, the lower vertebra on the spine were kind of they say extraordinarily small. So basically, so the writer here, Glenn Conroy, again an expert evolutionist, saying it suggests they were not adapted for bearing the heavy loads associated with full upright postures, and he notes that note the much larger cross-sectional area of the body of the sacrum in humans. So basically, because when you stand upright, all your weight will go to that point on the sacrum, the body, and so if it's very small, you're going to end up with a lot of strain on that, and you're going to end up with also the back problems. And so basically, if that's very small, it's not really well adapted to actually carry those loads. So to actually bear that weight, so it suggests it wasn't designed to go to walk like we did based on that feature alone. Okay, so that's an important feature, and I'll just go forward here. It's interesting that the sacral that body in Australopithecus sediba is large relative to Africanus, but small relative to afarensis. So even the other Australopithecines are even smaller, some of them. Okay, so they have the similar thing. They weren't designed to carry heavy loads when standing upright. So, and another thing is now Homo naledi. Now, I believe these were humans, but I believe they had some sort of development pathology, and this sort of helps back it up because what they found on the pelvis indicates it has a very flaring pelvis, sort of more like Australopithecine-like, and its body is actually the smallest recorded in the hominin fossil record. And I believe there's a thing that can explain that. It's called cretinism, and we may get to that, where basically it stunts growth in the skeleton, and then you have these developmental abnormalities, and you find them in the pelvis. It has a flaring pelvis and things like that. So if we get to that, we can talk more about that. But I find it very interesting that sacrum, the one piece they have of the sacrum in an individual from a Homo naledi, which I believe is human. It had long legs, essentially modern human feet. So I certainly believe it was human, but I believe there was pathology there. This also explains the low brain size, but we'll get back to that. Now, so I'll get back to the other thing. Another thing is there's these sacrotuberous ligaments. So again, if I go back to this diagram, you can see on the right there, it labels these sacrotuberous ligaments, and they basically bind the sacrum and the ischium, the sort of posterior bottom part of the pelvis, together. But also when you stand in an erect position, basically they kind of stabilize the sacroiliac joint. So that's where the pressure goes when you stand. So it goes to the sacrum, but then it goes to the hip bones and through the sacroiliac joint. So it's a lot of force when you stand up. So again, if that's not stable, it indicates the creature wasn't designed that well to handle standing upright for long periods or being stable in that position. So again, that's an argument, again, that sort of tends to negate the fact that these creatures walk like humans. And in fact, you have generally evolutionists fall into two camps on these. You have one camp that basically says that the Australopithecines were walk like humans and kind of left the tree living life generally behind them, maybe now and again, but they have some primitive, they retain some primitive features. To me, that's pretty much untenable. But you have another camp that recognizes that there were differences, that they didn't actually walk like humans and things like that, and so and also that they had a significant tree living lifestyle, and they were built for living in trees. Okay, so so basically, so we've done the in terms of the sacroiliac joint. So there's one other thing I wanted to get to in that regard about the pelvis, and basically it's the blades, the iliac blades. So basically, let's go to the diagram here. So you can see here, maybe the bottom one is best, but what you find is if you look at the chimp blades, the top one, you can see that the basically the hip bones is very tall, very long, okay, and the human ones and afferences are very short. But if you look at the bottom one, what you find is if you look from top, the chimpanzees ones, the blades kind of, if the sagittal plane is in kind of middle, and the blades almost are perpendicular to the sagittal plane, which puts it in the coronal plane, and the afarensis one, you can see there, well, it's a little bit curved, but not that much. So some evolutionists believe that it's more comparable to the chimp one than the human one in terms of the orientation of it, how the pelvic blades flare out, and basically the orientation. So the human ones, you can see there, it kind of curves around the vertebral column, okay, and that means that the muscles that stabilize the lateral side of the hips when you stand up and things like that, the gluteal muscles have attachment points on the side, whereas in the chimpanzees, and to a large degree Lucy, those muscles would not be there would not reach that far around, so it would have problems again stabilizing the body of the trunk when you're in a upright position. So basically, and here you can see some evolutionists even admit that basically the forward extension of the hip that provides attachment for the muscles enable us to keep our balance when standing upright. It seems likely that its absence of afferensis meant that I would have difficulty keeping upright while standing still. So that's Pristering and Peter Andrews. So they're certainly evolutionists, and even they acknowledge that. And basically, even and Richmond and Brian Richmond and Kevin Atala note that the iliac blades remain relatively coronally oriented, as I mentioned, which may have compromised the ability of the gluteal muscles to balance the trunk for a full stand phase. So, and this just another quote from Glenn to this sort of thing to indicate that. Okay, one thing with the Lucy pelvis, it's smaller than the human. So if you go back here, you can see it's smaller in size, but it's actually broader. So I've superimposed in there. So basically, and it shows how the pelvic blades flare out rather than curve around so much. It's just slight curvature there. But even though it's smaller, the pelvis is actually broader than in the humans because the iliac blades in humans curve around more. So basically, now this paper is going back a few years, but they point out here. So we're continuing on with the foot. So we're getting in more the foot region now in terms of afferensis with Stern and Sussman. And they note in summary, the foot and ankle remains revealed to us an animal that engaged in climbing as well as bipedality. The notion that afferensis was an exceptional strong walker and then its elongated toes may have been of service to it in moving over rough stony ground or in mud where some slight gripping ability would have been useful, is untenable. There is no evidence that any extant primate has long, curved, heavily muscled hands and feet for any purpose other than to meet the demands of full or part-time arboreal life, that is, living in the trees. Okay. Now, a recent study here by Ruff et al., they look at the cat's computer tomography scans, I think it was, of the structural properties of the femur, humerus, and afferences, okay, and that are known to be developmentally plastic. So meaning that during life or development, it is affected by these mechanical strain or whatever put on them. And I compared them to so-called other early hominins, modern humans, and chimpanzees, and they found that the Lucy and Australopithecus in general, so meaning all the Australopithecines, show differences in limb bone structural proportion from those of modern humans and Homo erectus that indicate significant differences in both locomotor behavior and relative muscularity. And so there's a lot there, so I'll try to skip some of it. And they found that the limb bone structural proportion of the Lucy provide evidence for substantial more arboreal, that is, climbing behavior than either modern humans or Homo erectus. And that is, this was not a trivial component either. And a possible reason for using the trees more often include foraging for food and escape from predators. And as I mentioned before, hand-assisted arboreal bipedalism, it would be a great way to get food. So you can climb out the branches, holding one hand, the other supported by one hand holding onto an overheading branch and the other grabbing the food. But the other thing, maybe we'll get, I don't know if we get time to it later, but this last thing about predators, that's very important, because if you understand what the environment that evolutionists say these creatures lived in, it makes the African savannah now look like a picnic, okay? There was predators galore, and basically the only way you would have survived is basically by if you were able to live in the trees, basically. But I won't get into that anymore. Maybe we'll get time for that later. And they say, furthermore, there's evidence that the terrestrial bipedal gait in Lucy may have differed in subtle but important ways from that of later Homo, decreasing locomotor efficiency when on the ground and limiting terrestrial mobility. Now, I don't know when I say differed in subtle but important ways, I'm not sure what, if it's important ways, then I don't think it's subtle, but anyhow, that's the language I use. And also they know that where possible to evaluate the same morphological attributes are present in other Australopith specimens as well as Homo habilis sensu stricto OH62. And that's very important because it shows that where they could examine it, other Australopithecines show the same attributes that were built for living in trees mainly. And sure, if you can walk in branches on the trees, sure you can walk on the ground too. But that was not their main way of getting around, and they weren't designed to walk and run like humans by no stretch of imagination, from examining the way the pelvis was designed and other things. And also that it was designed in Homo habilis, specimen called OH62. If we get to that later, but I believe Homo habilis was basically just a phantom species, mainly made up of Australopithecines that were sort of, they couldn't classify any better, so they it was actually invented by Louis Leakey in the 1960s, and so they put them in there as a mismatch of all sorts of things. There's the odd Homo erectus specimens wrongly classified as well, but it's interesting that the one specimen OH62, that's the only, as far as I know, apart from the type specimen OH7, which has some finger bones associated with it, but that has diagnostic skeletal elements associated with it, supposedly diagnostic remains, dental remains, or whatever. And basically, because OH62, their finding was also designed for living in the trees. And if you look at it, we'll get later look at it, its skeleton was probably in limb proportion, was probably as ape-like or even more than Lucy. and then it's supposed to be evolved from Lucy or something like that. So that's it's very contradictory. Anyhow, I go on to say, these observations imply fundamental differences in ecology and behavior between Australopithecus and Homo erectus. It is likely that a number of different forms of terrestrial bipedality were practiced by early hominins, and that arboreal behavior remained an important part of their locomotive repertoire. So that, again, the words I say, a number of different forms of terrestrial bipedality were practiced by early hominins. Now, I believe that this is indicate God is a great designer. He creates variations in the theme. He created all these different primates, whether existing or extinct. And why can't he use? So he'll create variability, diversity there, whatever. And that's what I believe the fossil record shows. And the fact that there are fossils way before the Australopithecus that shows were able to in evolution time that were able to walk bipedally is a real indication of that. Okay, now so let's go on to one of the issues. I guess is the toe bones of afferences. Okay, so this is, did it have a divergent toe, like a first toe or first ray? Was it an opposable big toe so it could use it for grasping, or was it like human in line with the other toes? And evolutionists certainly want to portray it as being certainly some do, as being in line with other toes. In fact, there was a Scientific I forgot it here. Scientific American article somewhere. I had it somewhere. Here it is. That showed. I don't know if you can you see this diagram here? Anyhow, you still with me, Donny?
Yes. Yeah. I put you full screen so we can see it, Peter.
I just pop up. I'm just going to pop out for a second. Back to the screen.
Yeah.
Are you? I don't know if you can see it. Can you see this here? Okay.
Yes, I put you full screen so the audience can see it better.
Notice that okay. Could you hear me when I was talking? You can hear me okay? Because
yes. Yep.
Yeah. So here you can see Australopithecus leba. So this represents here the big toe here. And notice here there are no bones that would indicate on this, yet they have it again aligned as if it was but there's no evidence for that. And also note that they put, this is the little foot one, they put that as basically non-divergent. But when Clark and I think Philotovius published on it, they had it as divergent. And I don't know. So this goes that some interpret it as divergent, the ones that found it, and others come along later. I don't know whether, and basically say no, it was non-divergent, and basically non-opposable because it suits the narrative. And again, they have here afferences as basically the slide here. Okay, so basically, because it suits the narrative, and a lot of the evidence is, and also that it had a sort of it had a medial longitudinal arch in the foot like humans do, which only humans are known to have. But a lot of it, but from the toe bones itself, the evidence is very iffy or ambiguous about that. A lot of the evidence actually comes from the Leotoli footprints, basically from Tanzania, and so but the fossil evidence, and according to Glenn Conroy, okay, he says that toe bones of afferences from Harder are both longer and much more curved than those of modern humans. And so for some, that reinforces that there were evidence for arboreal activity and that sort of tree delving activity in afferences, since it is easier for feet to grip tree branches with long curved digits. However, this neglects the obvious point that it is not easy for feet to grip tree branches without an opposable big toe. but that's begging the question, you know. So let's just look at that, because this is sort of quite, I make a big thing of that. Now, to his credit, De Silva, who was actually, I think, one of the authors of the article I just showed, in fact, he was the only main author, in an early article, he did co extensively on this, dealing with this stuff, and on commenting on the evidence for the toe bones in afarensis, doesn't seem to be much, and some people interpret it as being non-opposable. This particularly this metatarsal a specimen, a metatarsal, basically called AL 33354. But others have noted that the base of this metatarsal is strongly concave and ape-like, and set at an angle that is consistent with some hallucinal abducens, meaning it's divergent. So basically, again, you can interpret it differently. And if you look at the juvenile so this is the human foot here. So the key point is on top is the first, and if you see on the top right, the first metatarsal and the medial cuneiform, they're kind of important in interpreting this. So if you have here now the juvenile specimen of afarensis called DIC111F, it had a medial cuneiform, that's one of the tarsal bones. It was associated with increased hallucinal mobility. So that means it increased movement of the big toe, okay? And so basically it could likely use it for grasping to some degree and stuff like that. And in fact, he notes that while in a paper on, again by De Silva et al. In a different paper, he knows that while afarensis had a greater range of hallucinal mobility than modern humans, okay, so if I had a greater hallucinal mobility in modern humans, I mean I could move the big toe to some degree, and it wasn't non-opposable. And they likely could not oppose the hallux, that is the big toe, with the lateral digits to the degree seen in modern apes or Ardipithecus and a taxon to which Bertel foot belongs. But because he thinks that I couldn't do to the degree that, say, modern apes and some other specimen did, doesn't mean that I couldn't. And that's just his opinion anyhow. But it sees, but it sort of indicates there that I could move the big toe to some degree. So it wasn't kind of inflexible, as it's sort of pointed out. However, and he also goes on, so juvenile afarensis may have had more hallucinal mobility and abduction ability than adult afarensis in modern humans. So again, the juvenile afarensis specimen indicates I could move the big toe more than the adult one. Now, anyhow, but so at best the evidence is ambiguous, but it indicates that the argument that the big toe of afarensis was non-opposable, I think is very weak. I think it indicates it had some ability. And the thing is, as other studies indicate, these creatures lived in the trees. They had to live in the trees to survive, and you only can be a good tree dweller if you can use your big toe to grasp with. That'd be a very important part of its lifestyle. So to me, from a design point of view, I believe God would have created these creatures with a divergent big toe, and the evidence is very ambiguous, and if anything indicated that there was some divergence there. And so looking at how others, in terms of how did afarensis then walk. So here's some study by Christine Berg, a few years now, but it seems that Australopithecine walk, analysing the Lucy-skeleton, the pelvis and lower limbs of the Lucy-skeleton. She says that it seems that Australopithecine walk differed significantly from that of humans, involving a sort of waddling gait with large rotatory movements of the pelvis and shoulders around the vertebral column. Such a walk likely required a greater energetic cost than does human bipedalism. And basically, so I get the Charles Oxnard. So he basically found that these statement there, basically, these fossils clearly differ more from humans. That is, Australopithecine fossils differ more from humans and African apes than do these two living groups from each other, the Australopithecines are unique. Okay, so he's an expert in anatomy and an evolutionist, so he's like a hostile witness. He says it's likely that their bipedality was mechanically different from that of humans, though terrestrial. It is further likely that these fossils were accomplished arborealists. The combination of the two functions within the same set of creatures is certainly unique among hominoids. And it goes on about there a little bit there. The one thing I noticed there is, however able most apes, indeed most non-human primates, may be as terrestrial bipeds, the habitual use of bipedality is not a major component of their lifestyles, and certainly not the way that they survive. And I don't think any Australopithecine would survive by walking on two legs. And maybe, I don't know whether that's so. Maybe I'll go back to Donny right now, and we can where we want to take it from here. I'll just go back to you. So I sort of cover that. So the next thing I could go, if you want to continue, I could go to the Lotoli footprints, or I could go to the environment that these creatures lived in to show why it was so hostile, basically, and stuff like that. I don't. Or I'll leave to you. You're the host, so I'll question or audience questions or whatever.
What we'll do is, firstly, Peter, excellent presentation there. I enjoy how technical and comprehensive it is. And so there were several interesting citations there. And I did get some good audience questions, but I want to ask you this. And before I ask you the question itself, I want to lay out the evolutionist argument and then have you respond. And so basically, the evolutionist camp, they will argue that they're not necessarily looking for an ancestor to humans when it comes to the hominid fossil record, but of a species that is morphologically intermediate between two closely related lineages, right? So in this case, humans and chimpanzees. And they'll say that this species has to share characteristics from either or both, with some of those features looking partway between the two. And so the question is, therefore, they argue that this is the case with Lucy and the Australopithecines that you've been discussing for the past little while. In your opinion, what's a good way to respond to that claim?
Well, I think the last person I quoted there was Charles Oxnard, who examined them, and he found that they differed as much or more from both humans and apes, the Australopithecines, than basically so they were more different from humans and apes than humans are. So basically, they're kind of out there on a very different. So they're very different for both humans and apes. They're not in between. If you understand, let me go back to the quote. He's like I said, he's a hostile witness, but he's a very accomplished. But it's saying so. In each case, although initial studies suggest that the fossils are similar to humans, or at worst intermediate between humans and African apes, study of the complete evidence readily shows that the reality is otherwise. These fossils clearly differ more from humans and African apes than these two living groups from each other. The Australopithecines are unique. So he's examined sort of humeri, ankle bones, metacarpals of Australopithecines. So basically, that they're not kind of an intermediate. Basically, that's what he's finding. So basically, I'd say that they're not intermediate. And the thing is, there's another thing. So say like the Australopithecines, they were capable of some upright walking. I don't know how evolutionists say they were habitual, obligatory bipedalists or whatever. I think that's very unlikely, because I don't see if you're built for living in the trees and your pelvis isn't that stable when you're standing erect, and clearly your feet were designed for long curved toes, and it seems like it had some sort of divergence in the toes. Basically, it indicate I don't see how that could be the case. And also, if maybe I'll get onto this, but the environment I live in, you wouldn't have survived, because it was all, they proposed all these hyenas, lions, 10 times worse than today. So if anyone basically got from the trees and wandered too far, they'd basically just be part of a buffet, on a Pliocene buffet or something like that. Because they'd be the main course, because like they would not be able to run lions, hyenas, or other these predators. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have the intelligence of humans, and so and the bipedals were even a human bipedal is not going to run a lion on the savannah. So basically, only thing, if they could live in the trees, and they had to live well, and so there's no way they would have left that lifestyle, even in an evolutionary scenario. It doesn't make sense, and so yeah. I forgot what the question.
So here's a question from a critic that is related to what we're talking about here. And so I've got it up on the screen. And he says, but Australopithecines had an inline big toe. You've addressed this quite a bit in your last presentation. 3 arches in the foot, a bowl-like pelvis. They were obligate bipeds and much more similar to humans than gibbons. So I think this questioner is trying to argue that they were habitual upright walking creatures. Peter, what are your thoughts?
Well, the thing is, I don't. It wouldn't really worry me if there were, but because to me, the Bible doesn't talk about it. So and to be honest, I would find it odd if there weren't sort of bipedal primates, and there are. It's just a lot of diversity. So, but in these ones, the pelvis is not bowl-like. The human pelvis is bowl-like. The Lucy pelvis here is, if you got it here, that's more bowl-like. This is sort of flaring out to the side. This is more sort of not a bowl-like. Maybe it's a sort of like a satellite dish or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of, this is more curving. This curves around a lot more. Okay, so the human one is more bowl-like. It's very. You can see the inlets are different too. The thing is, it's not really that. I wouldn't call it bowl-like, and so, and the thing about the arches. That if you read it, and I'm just looking at the evolutionist papers, I'm not quoting my own paper or anyone else, that the evidence for an arch is ambiguous. There is no real evidence. The only evidence is the Laetoli footprints, and I might get to that, but to me there's 2 footprints there, and I believe there is a footprint there, but it's not the site G and S ones. That it's site A. I believe site A footprints indicates there was a bipedal apish creature with a divergent toe walking there to some degree, and maybe I should show these, and maybe that because that, and that's where the inline thing of the big toe comes too, from the site G and S footprints, which I believe are humans. So shall I just talk about the Laetoli footprints a bit then?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. This is a good segue. Yeah, I think this is a good segue in light of this specific argument from a critic in the chat for us to move into the Laetoli footprints. Let's do that, Peter.
Yep.
And so when you're ready, I can put
I'll go to the Laetoli footprints and I'll just get the where we are. Okay.
There we go.
So basically here you have the Laetoli footprints from Tanzania. And so you have I think on the left is it's a site G footprint. Now there's also a trail called site S, which is similar as well. And basically they're the ones that are very human-like. And then you have this thing on the right. Now these were found a long time ago, but they couldn't interpret them, and so they were kind of went into obscurity. But recently, again to his credit, De Silva has looked at them, and these are site A footprints. But you notice there that they're not, these two aren't made by the same creature. Okay, so it sort of had a more broader foot, shorter, not as you know, the side A was more broader, and you can see at it indicates that the toe sort of must have stuck out a bit to create that sort of impression. And so basically, if you look at the side G foot, the human-like one. So here's an expert, Russell Tuttle. He examined the best individual prints from the side G footprint trails, or the casts of them. And basically, so these are dated to an evolutionary timeline to 3.66 million years ago. And he says the earliest definitive evidence for obligate, obligate means that, you know, that's the primary form of walking. The earliest definitive evidence for obligate hominid bipedalism that are from Tanzania and are these footprint trails. In all observable features of foot shape and walking pattern, the three creatures that made the trails are indistinguishable from modern, habitually barefoot human beings walking at a leisurely pace. Indeed, if the prints were undated, or if they had come from a younger time period, they probably would be designated Homo. And so there, if you want to have the most obvious, the simplest, parsimonious explanation is, if they look human and indistinguishable from human footprints, perhaps they are human footprints. Okay, so that's sort of but of course you cannot have in the evolutionist timeline, you cannot have humans walking around 3.66 million years ago. The whole story would collapse. Okay, so they cannot have humans there. So basically, Russell Tuttle, so he's an evolutionist again as a hostile witness. So he says there's the options about these footprints are that there was a species of Australopithecus with virtually human feet. Okay, that's why they try to make afferences. I think the revisionists have tried to make afferences as foot bones as human as possible, interpret them as human as possible, because then I can say that they made these footprints, and that's the going theory. Or Homo, that it was present at Latolia 3.66 million years ago. Again, with Homo, you always have to be a little bit careful when evolutionists use the term Homo. What do they mean? Because early Homo means essentially Australopithecines, okay? And even Homo habilis, or sometimes if they're talking about Homo habilis sensu stricto, which is Homo habilis interpreted narratively, then they would put another species, Homo rudelhensis, but they're still I believe they're still Australopithecines, and even evolutionists put them into some reclassify them as belonging to the Australopithecines or some other genus. So you have to be very careful. Don't assume that they are humans like us when they say Homo. They could be, but you know, I know the one evolutionist, when they're talking about when he even uses the word human, he refers to anything in Homo. So that could be Homo habilis or something like that. So which is not human. So you have to be very careful in interpreting that. But anyhow, so he says it could be a Homo was present at Latolia around 3.66 million years ago. Now, so, and the trackways were made by an anonymous genus for which you have no skeletal remains. Okay, so basically, he says the first of three options are the most likely, given that the trackways date to 3.66 million years ago. So again, it's the date that is the problem. If these were dated some million years later, no problem accepting humans would make them. That is for sure. And there's
actually, Peter, before you go to the next slide,
so
I was wondering if I could ask a question on that previous citation, which is really good.
Sure.
And I apologize if you answered this, as I'm also trying to keep up with our busy live chat. When it says Homo, when it says Homo was present at Laetoli, are they talking about Homo erectus or Homo habilis?
Well, that's what I'm saying here. You don't know, but the thing is, there isn't really there isn't really any bones relate. I'm not aware of any foot. I'm not aware of any foot bones to Homo habilis. I think there's a skeleton of OH62 which is more ape-like than than Lucy, and so there isn't. And I'm not really aware of any foot bones from Homo habilis. So he probably, in this regard, let's see. Yeah. So even in the article in Scientific American, it doesn't have any. I can't see any foot bones attributed to Homo habilis. So I don't believe there are any that are associated with diagnostic cranial remains. So basically, there are some like femurs that they say are Homo habilis, but they are also, some say they're Homo erectus. So that cancels that out. So basically,
it's kind of a waste.
I don't know what he's referring to, but in this context, it probably is referring to Homo erectus because there are no Homo habilis foot bones that I'm aware of. So yeah.
Okay, so the paleoanthropologists themselves then are admitting that there is overlap in the Homo genus and also the Australopithecines, in the sense that they've coexisted with each other throughout history.
Well, I think the I think they admit that the evolutionists know, because Homo has been pushed. It depends. Even like what they call early Homo, so that would overlap with some Australopithecines, yes. But the thing is, what they call early Homo, again, different evolutionists interpret differently. So some include Homo erectus, some don't.
Right.
Some just include Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, and some other specimens I found, with some really dodgy, which are probably Australopithecines anyhow. So basically, but that's that, and from them, they don't mind that because the early because that creates the impressions that they were sort of slowly evolving one into other. But the thing is, all these early Homo specimens from Homo habilis backwards, they were not Homo erectus, they were not human, and so they and some evolutionists assign them to Australopithecines. So basically, you have there was just variation within a kind, or the Australopithecine kind. That's the way I prefer to look at it, and so there wasn't, and basically, there's a great morphological gap between what in evolutionist the standard view is that sort of Homo afarensis evolved into Homo habilis, and Homo habilis evolved into Homo erectus. The problem is Homo habilis's limb bone structure and skeleton was more. I've got slides I can get to show that, illustrate that. The quotes from that were more ape-like, or as ape-like as Lucy's and Australopithecines. And the thing is, the Homo erectus skeletons known from the Takano boy was, even though evolutionists admit that from the neck down, it was essentially modern. And this is where you have getting to the probability game, waiting time problem, because you can do, and I've got a thing where people look at, so even evolution looked at say you interpret the Lucy as walking upright, what would it take, what features would it need to walk upright like a Homo erectus, a human? And so you can work out a number of features, and then you can work out how many mutations would you need in a certain time period, and then what is the probability of that happening? And it basically shows it's the waiting time problem. It's impossible. But yeah, because there's a big gap between a Homo erectus skeleton, a postcranial skeleton, and the postcranial skeleton of the Australopithecine, and I include a Homo habilis in that.
That's very good, Peter. I appreciate you answering that question. That was very helpful. So if you'd like to, feel free to continue on.
Back to your, I'll go back to the main screen. Yeah.
So a question here, when it comes to the fossil record.
Continue on with the Laetoli footprints?
Actually, yes, let's do that. Let's continue on with the Laetoli footprints, and then we'll
finish. May I finish that one off?
Take your time, Peter, no rush.
Okay. So So basically, I'm saying the simplest interpretation is that the site G and S footprints belong to true humans, that is, descendants of Adam and Eve. Okay, and there are and basically the site S ones, which you haven't shown, but they were actually larger, and so likely they were adults, and the smaller ones, site G, were children, which account for the size difference in tracks, and basically that's consistent with Tuttle's analysis that trails are indistinguishable from modern habitually barefoot human beings walking at a leisurely pace. Okay. Now, the other ones was the side, the ones that were on the right, the side A footprints, and the growth shape of these were chimpanzee-like with slight hallucinal divergence and perhaps some midfoot mobility. So this indicates that the toe was somewhat opposable. It could be used moving around, grasping, and so basically this individual walked bipedally with a narrow step, with indicative of a valgus knee, adducted hips, or both. The combination of foot morphology and gait kinematics inferred from the preserved footprints preclude them from having been made by afarensis. But that's purely based on what they infer afarensis walk like, based on they believe afarensis had a sort of non-divergent big toe and made the outer footprints. But then again, in a companion paper in basically looking at the side A footprints, I mentioned that there's two possible remains as a probable explanation for the side A prints that could have been created by a hominin species other than afarensis, perhaps as represented by the Bertel foot. Now, this is the Bertel foot is some foot bones found in Ethiopia, not in sort of, I don't know if it's exactly the same locality, but not that far from where afarensis bones have been found in sort of the same sort of region in Ethiopia, if I'm correct, and basically in the same evolutionary time period. But what they found was it indicated that the toe, the big toe was divergent to some degree, and so basically, to me, I'm thinking maybe the Bertel foot is an indicator of what the afarensis foot was, divergent. Why not? But the alternative, so this orthogonal could have, but the side A footprint could have been created by afarensis individual walking in an atypical manner. Okay, maybe it was walking in a typical manner because I don't really know how afarensis walked. They're just inferring that it had the sort of human-like foot or whatever. So basically, yeah, the side A footprints on the right were likely from an Australopithecines, likely afarensis, but you can't be sure of this. Even chimps can walk some distance bipedally. Certainly gibbons can, and so so it's no surprise if the Australopithecines could walk upright for some distance, but it wouldn't been that their main lifestyle was in the trees. But they could have made those side 8 footprints, but the other ones were made by humans. And I noticed that the side 8 footprints walked in a very strange bipedal manner, as it involved cross-stepping, in which each foot crosses over the body's midline to touch down in front of the other foot. So it wasn't so it's kind of more awkward walking, And so imagine if you walk like that, trying to outrun predators on an African savanna 10 times worse than today. That wouldn't go down too well. And this is the bird-tail foot I was showing you before, interpreted as having you can see there the big toe being divergent, okay, and that could very be, but it's said to be too primitive to belong to afarensis, okay, but how did I know? It was contemporaneous in time of afarensis, and it wasn't assigned to any other taxon, so basically, one thing is the evidence of a longitudinal arch, and I think the other person was
mentioned about the arches and adductor hallux, that is a non-divergent big toe, appear to be mainly based on the Laetoli sites GM as well as site S fossil footprints. But even De Silva, the evolutionist who generally believe the Afarensis footprints were made, Afarensis made those site footprints, he says some evolutionists do not believe these footprints belong to Australopithecus afarensis as they are too human-like. He knows that these evolutionists instead propose they were maybe as of yet undiscovered hominin with a more human-like foot. Well, I don't think humans, as some descendants are even not undiscovered, but they can't acknowledge that because of the timeline. But what I find interesting is how most evolutionists accept the Laetology footprints as having made by Afarensis, even though some consider them too human-like to belong to Afarensis. Yet they reject the Bertel foot as belonging to Afarensis because they are considered too primitive to belong to Afarensis. So my thing is, if findings tend to be interpreted only to support the human evolution narrative, are we dealing with science or a belief system? Okay. Okay. So anyhow, I'll leave it there. There's been different there's been different interpretations of the Laetoli footprints. They've re-examined them, analysed them in great detail, really esoteric analysis, fine detail, and some find that they are very human-like. Some find something to support their contention that they weren't quite human-like, and support that because some people believe that Afarensis didn't walk in a human manner and had a bent knee, bent hip gait, and so basically they, I think, a study by Hatala kind of found that basically, I don't know if I got it here. Yeah, found that the Laetoli footprints showed evidence of distinct gait and relatively greater limb flexion, a touchdown, and potentially a less arched foot. Okay, and so Fernando said that the Afarensis by the form of bipedals that was well developed, but not equivalent to that seen in modern humans today. So they kind of looked at. I've looked at that paper and read it, and the problem is I know I've done a lot of signal process analysis, but brain data, and when you get into my data, it's very hard to figure in your mind, have I done it correctly? I got no idea because it's very detailed. It was a lot of selecting of data, a lot of averaging and things like that, and esoteric analysis. I don't know how right or wrong they've done the data. I'm sure they're good researchers. But
Peter,
the thing is, yeah.
I was going to say, and I'm glad you're touching on that, because that first paper you're talking about here.
I'll come back to you. Yeah.
So I'll take this off the screen.
So that one or the previous slide?
No, that slide's perfect. And I'm not sure if you can see the paper on my end. And so this is the paper, Laetoli footprints, reveal, so on and so forth. And you had that on your slide. And I'm so glad that you're commenting on it, because over the last year or so, I've had many critics utilize this paper to say that the statistical analyses have essentially suggested that the Laetoli footprints, the toe, is too divergent to be a human toe, and they've compared it to modern human footprints today from those that are walking barefoot. But you don't seem very convinced by it, eh? This is a problematic paper, Peter.
Well, the thing is, if you can put it back the other slide, there was a paper published after that by another group who found that basically, so this was by Rachel and Gordon. So the year later, they did an analysis on the footprints on two newly discovered individuals walking at Laetoli. They said that they're consistent with bipedal mechanics that include a generally extended hip and knee. So that's opposite. So the Hatala found knee and limb flexions to some degree. These find that generally extended hip and knee although they may not be identical to the modern human pattern, but and I suggest that basically the accounts are very largely similar to those of modern humans. So I'm saying, the studies agree and disagree, but but the thing is, I'll just get back to the other slide. Hang on, I'll just get back in a sec. Okay.
Oh, Peter, I think you might have accidentally muted yourself on your end. It says that you're currently muted, but if you do click to the bottom of the StreamYard stream, right next to the cam, there should be a button that you can click unmute. It should be right next to the on the StreamYard window. Sometimes it lets me unmute the guest, but it says that you muted it yourself. Actually, from my end, it says your mic isn't connected. So you might have to reconnect it, but I think you're using your laptop mic. And so maybe as you're, okay, as Peter's figuring that out, I think he might have lost connection. But to the audience, as we wait for Peter to rejoin, firstly, George Bond, thank you very much for the super chat. He says another nail. Oh, yeah, Peter, we got you back. Looks like you're back.
We back?
Yes. Yeah, okay. I can see you.
I'll go back to the other slide. Well, you got it there?
Yes, I've got it up on the screen now, Peter.
So, I don't know if you can. Yeah, that one. So it says numerous studies have revealed that substrate type and sediment erosion can impact footprint morphology and preservation, impacting any simple relationship between skeletal form, foot function, and footprint formation. These recent studies should give us pause interpreting fine details from foot functioning from the low tally prints, as extraordinary as they are. So basically, the more fine detail you look at these things, the probably more because you like the Hatalis study, they used chimps or people using putting their creating footprints, and then I compared it to footprints that have been fossilized for how long, and maybe not exactly the same substrate or soil type, and then maybe there been some erosion or who knows weathering before fossilization. So it's very to really have all this fine detail, and then you have different studies indicate that they are very human. So basically, again, you have this ambiguity, but personally, I don't think there's that much ambiguity. I think to the casual observer, even the casual observer can, when you look at it, the footprints here. I'll go back to it. Put on here. They look quite human. Hang on. Yeah, you can. I think that on the left there, it kind of looks just eyeballing it. It looks very human, certainly to me. And not comparing it to the right one, which is not a human. But if you made some fresh tracks, then I don't know how valid it is to sort of do a really fine detailed analysis on comparing the both of them. And you have to also interpret, what speed were they walking at, and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of things there, and so I go with the original interpretation, because probably that was less blinded by evolutionary narrative than the more recent one. Although they're all blinded by evolutionist narratives, but yeah. But the ones that are interpreted as being human-like, probably have less of a axe to grind, because it doesn't really give them much of it. It doesn't sort of support their cause that much, if you understand what I mean. I'll come back to you now.
Yes, I think that was a great analysis of the Laetoli footprints, because I think it's such an important issue, Peter, because the evolutionists and the evolutionary community, they don't believe or assume that modern looking human footprints should exist that long ago. And so obviously they're going to do everything in their power to contradict, I think, the clear observation. So I think you did a good job.
There is also one. There's another thing. There's a skeleton that's been found. I think a Cadanamu skeleton. I might just. Shall I just briefly go to that, or?
Yes.
I
think that's a good idea.
To the slides. I'll see if I'll just do my slides sort of. See if I can. I'll just see if I can find this skeleton here. But gee, I have a lot of. Here we are. So basically, they found a skeleton called Cadanamu, and it was assigned to Australopithecus afarensis, but largely because of the date. It was dated to 3.6 million years ago. Now, unfortunately, there was no cranium or dentition, and there was no foot, ankle, or hand, wrist bones associated with the skeleton. But it was actually, on the evolution timeline, 500,000 years older than Lucy. Now, it had long legs and a torso, and a pelvis more like those of a modern human than an African ape, according to Gibbon's writing in Science. And it showed that the fully upright walking was in place at this early date. However, excuse me, my throat has just got a bit hoarse. But some scientists have questioned how can the reliability of assigning it to afarensis, even evolutionists, because there's no dental parts or skull parts that you can associate with the skeleton. And my thing is basically that skeleton is probably more like a Homo erectus, a human skeleton, but because it's in the wrong time period, there's no evolution that is going to say that was a human-like skeleton, that they assign it to afarensis because of it, again, because the time from a bit like the Laetoli footprints. Humans, even in evolution timeline, there were these skeletons there, but they're kind of defined out of existence, basically, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, basically, yeah. So that's a kind of interesting. It's a very interesting find, but unfortunately, the head was missing, and the foot, ankle, hand, wrist bones were also missing. So that precludes any sort of definite thing. But has everything else. Most of it was kind of more human-like. So to me, that was a human there, but you know, no evolutionist is going to admit that. So basically, yeah. So I'll leave it to you to go into what you want to go on to.
Yes, that's great. I'm just reading through those citations, Peter, that you provide, and I appreciate again just how comprehensive you are in documenting directly from the conventional literature. You know, these are all quotes from the secular literature itself. And so, okay.
Humphrey and String are not the only ones that have brought up the issue. I don't know what they believe about, but there's other evolutionists that also questioned it. I mean, they won't assign it to humans, but they questioned that the reliability of assigning to afarensis, because it's only based on I guess the location and timeline, nothing else. And because the skeleton's features don't seem to are very modern-like.
I think it might be appropriate then to move to this question. This was a question I had, but since someone in the audience is asking it, I'll just put it up on screen and we'll try and do our best to address it. And so this questioner wants you to speak to I'll go through it here. Ask him why there is nothing human like about any of the Australopithecus skulls, specifically the foramen magnum.
Yeah, I'm
So
there.
the hole at the base of the scroll base.
Foramen, yeah, okay. Yeah, I kind of anticipated something like this would come up. So I don't have a time to press live, but I think if you this is a evolutionist human evolutionary anatomy by Leslie Alo and Christopher Dean. And if you go to page 211-12, what they do is anyhow, they discuss the foramen magnum. Now, the argument works fine if you're comparing human and chimps. Fine, the foramen magnum is situated at the back, and the spinal cord in chimps sort of go more posteriorly rather than downwards. But the problem is when you can start comparing them with these alleged fossil hominids, you say that looking at the base, the position forward. Now you have to use the reference point. So here they use, say, the bitympanic line, which is sort of where the eardrum would be, and then you find you get sort of really funny effects. So basically, you have humans would be human foramen magnum is situated more posteriorly than Australopithecus africanus, and also some robust Australopithecines are more kind of foramen magnum is more anterior than that. So do they mean they're more bipedal than some humans? I think the problem is it's all over the place. There's no evolutionary progression in this. So it's like it's a dog's breakfast. And so even some evolutionists are moving away from this argument because they realize it's not. It just doesn't hold water. And so you know, I guess some people can debate me on this, but I could use things from even from Ardipithecus ramidus, that this problem of using that argument there too. So basically there's no progression. So in terms of that, so basically and I can see it in the book there that, and you know, it probably doesn't come out well, but basically you have in terms of that you have sort of so it says the form some specimen attributed to early Homo SK 847 or 824 and Kano 1805 have a foramen magnum whose anterior margin, like that of Paranthropus, lies well in front of the bitympanic line. However, modern Homo, as well as other fossils attributed to early Homo, KNMAR 1813, 3733, and 383, have a foramen magnum whose anterior margin lies on or slightly behind the bitympanic line. So basically, so this doesn't sort of you know, and basically and Africanus lies just in front of the bitympanic line, okay? And so basically, so what I'm saying is, yeah, it works fine for humans and chimps, but when you start doing these alleged hominids, it's all over the place, and I don't think you can tell much from it. And so
to reiterate,
I don't think it's that useful.
So to reiterate your argument, if I'm understanding correctly, when we look to your hominins in the fossil record, whether it's Ardipithecus ramidus, Australopithecus africanus, or afarensis, there's variation in the placement of the foramen magnum. It's not all in the same spot. Yeah. There's variation, so there's no clear linear progression to the placement of the human.
Yeah. Okay. At least if you use the bitympanic line, sort of where the eardrum would be as a reference, because you have to reference something, and it's and the thing is, I think you just dropped out there for a second, but even as an anthropogenesis, I think evolutionists now they were claiming, you know, as bipedal and that, and I think foramen magnum was used as an argument there too, more anterior, but now they're finding that those femurs aren't so much bipedal, or there's argument for that. So it probably wasn't that bipedal. It probably was bipedal in the sense that chimpanzees are also bipedal. It's just a matter to what degree. But so I think that it's a kind of very weak argument. And then you have to, if you use that, then you have to say that certain Australopithecines are more bipedal than humans. I think that's very, very unlikely.
You mentioned Sahelanthropus tigensis. Was that creature bipedal, Peter?
I've actually in the book I've kind of written quite a lengthy chapter on, well, not that lengthy, but I've written an analysis of it, and even I who accept that there is some walking upright, find that the evidence very ambiguous, and and a lot of evolutionists find the evidence very ambiguous. So I say the jury's still out, but if it was bipedal, it was probably like existing apes that are bipedal, and they vary, I think chimps are there's chimps, but the most bipedal ape I think are gibbons and and orangutans, and even the carrying angle. I suppose Lucy has a greater carrying angle. The angle of femur angles in more even than in humans, and I think some claim that makes it a super biped, but I think that's just more an artifact of its morphology. It has the femur, the neck of the femur is very long, and basically the pelvis is relatively very broad where the hip joints are, and so there's a lot of things that combine to make it that. But his legs are very short, and so it has a very different morphology for walking, very different to humans in that sense. And that's why I thought it would have walked very differently to humans, however it walked. But like Sahelanthropus, they were mainly designed for living in the trees. And I think maybe I should go to the thing about briefly just discuss that the environment they lived in, to give people a perspective that it wasn't like a walk in the park that the evolution are proposing. So let me just quote some evolutionists themselves. Shall I do that for just a few minutes?
Yes. Actually, Peter, before you go on to that, can I ask one quick question? Because
shall I go to shall I discuss? Yeah.
I think you were lagging out a little bit there, Peter, but it looks like you're back with me. I was wondering if I could ask you a quick question before we move on to your next slide. So this question is a question that I have, but I've also seen this question come up now several times in the live chat. And so I figured we can answer it all in one. And so the question, especially from the skeptics, how can we differentiate between, in the fossil record specifically, how can we distinguish which bones are truly ape and which bones are truly human? So if we pick up a fossil in the ground, are there any defining characteristics that we can say, okay, this is definitely a human bone and this is definitely an ape bone?
I think you have to look at the full picture. I think that sort of I think that if you're talking about modern humans, it's probably not very difficult. And if you look at this, if you find a whole postcranial skeleton, it's not very difficult, because the postcranial skeleton of a human is very different, or even erectus is very different to the Australopithecines, and I include Homo habilis in the Australopithecines, and even in the robust humans, which I call robust humans, whether it's Neanderthals, those that are classified as Homo heidelbergensis and Homo erectus broadly defined, even they are different have a certain feature that differs them from Australopithecines. So if you have a complete skull, then it's not too difficult to tell the difference. But it's more if you just find isolated bone here and there, then it's more difficult, okay? Because they're made of the same material. So unless you can do a DNA analysis or something like that, then it's more difficult. But if you have a fairly complete skeleton or skull, then I think it's much easier. You can identify them as and I believe Homo erectus were fully human. They did have some different features, although you can there still are some of those features still are evident in the population today, but not as much. And but there's and the main
I think that's a good answer. if I could add something and get your thoughts on it, and then we can move on to your next set of slides.
Yep.
There are a number of important features unique to humans not found in Australopithecines. And one specific trait that comes to mind is our ability as humans to talk. But we know that the ability to talk relies strongly on the hyoid bone, which essentially anchors the muscles of our tongue.
Yeah.
And in chimpanzees, the hyoid bone is different to the hyoid bone in humans. So if I'm not mistaken, in chimpanzees, that specific trait has a bulge that's not seen in humans, which attaches to air sacs in the larynx. Now, from my understanding, the only known Australopithecus hyoid bone comes from a juvenile skeleton found in Ethiopia. And this bone actually shows an extension for the laryngeal air sacs, indicating that this species vocalized very similarly to chimpanzees. And so my question is, could the hyoid bone, as long as we find them intact in the fossil record, could that help us differentiate between that which is human and that which is an Australopithecine ape, Peter?
To be honest, I'm not that familiar with that particular area, so I don't want to sort of mislead anyone in terms of what it could not show. So I kind of may leave. There may be something I may need to look at, but I haven't really looked at that closely, to be honest, because it's not a bone that is found very often.
Right,
in
it's
fact,
not.
You know,
It's not.
It's not. So I haven't really looked at it, and So I won't comment on it because I'm not that familiar with I'm not familiar with the specimen you're talking about. So I haven't looked at that. So there's so many things. There's so many fossil bones around. So sometimes you miss one. I'll leave that. Yeah.
Okay, Peter. Well, I appreciate that. We can move on to your next set of slides if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'll go here, and then I'll just find the area. Okay. I just looking out for where it is. Let's see. Here we go. All right, so I hope you can see that. So basically, a while ago in 1996, there was a documentary with Donald Johanson. He was a discoverer of Lucy, and he was in African savannah somewhere, I forget where, but anyhow, he was saying nightfall must have been a terrifying time for our earliest ancestors. Without the safety of this cow, could easily become a meal for some hungry predator lurking out there in the dark. It says it was the same for our ancestors who had very little protection. Yet somehow they were able to carve out a space for themselves and survive among these skilled African predators. But it was actually much worse, according to the evolutionists in the past. So according to anthropologists Donna Hart and Robert Sussman, the world of ancient hominids was full, and I use hominids here instead of hominins, okay, because, the world of ancient hominids was full of large, warm-blooded mammalian predators, and there are strong indications that hominids were regularly hunted. The diversity of large carnivores was extensive in the African paleo past. Many groups of carnivores that are now extinct, such as those huge short-faced bears, preyed on hominids in Africa, especially between 3.5 and 6 million years ago. Then about 3.5 million years ago, new carnivores evolved to join the previous groups, meaning that as many as 8 to 10 different species of saber-toothed cats, false saber-toothed cats, conical-toothed cats, gigantic hyenas, and large wolf-like canids were roaming the very same African sites where we now find hominid fossils. Think about how you would feel alone in the African expanse, knowing lions were on hunt, then multiply that by 10. And I go on here, and an incredible array of cats and pre-cats roamed the earth from 10 million years ago until relatively recently. One wonders how any primate, much less our smallish bipedal hominid, survived the predation of so many large-bodied, large-toothed felines. Okay, it's hard to imagine how any, and another evolution says, Craig Sanford says, it's hard to imagine how an early ape-like hominin could have survived the African night unless it slept in the trees as modern chimpanzees and bonobos do. Now, given that, it's hard to see, I've got a note there, it's hard to see a conga line of Australopithecines wanting to play survivor in this environment, even in less harsh conditions of today. Savanna baboons seek refuge in trees or cliffs at night in order to keep safe. So for these supposed hominids living in that environment, finding food and water would have been the least of their problems. The Australopithecines, they could not outrun their predators and were no much for them in battle. They didn't use weapons or fire to defend themselves. They had ape-like intelligence. Therefore, they were unlikely to outwit skilled African killer predators on their own turf. So even in evolutionary scenarios, survival of the fittest only works if something survives. And only Australopithecines are stuck with their arboreal, that is, tree-living lifestyle, would have survived. That means they didn't evolve into humans. Okay, so I'll come back here. So basically, so what I'm saying there is, it's always fun, even the evolutionary mutations to get to bipedals and from Australopithecines to Homo erectus. It's impossible anyhow from if you look at the probability for the mutations that are fixed in the genome in the time period we're looking at. But then you got to think about what are they saying, that they've been walking, they left the tree lifestyle behind them, walking in that environment full of these ferocious predators, and it's how could they possibly have survived, and so basically becoming more bipedal or more adventurous would not have been an advantageous trait at all, even if they could get it, because you'd be more likely to be picked off by a predator. And so basically that's another argument just against this whole scenario, that there was no basically evolutionary transition from Australopithecines to Homo erectus via Homo habilis. In fact, Homo habilis is basically was just most of them were just Australopithecines anyhow. So I'll just leave that for, but I'll leave you to go on to the next question. I don't know how long you want to continue this for, or happy to.
I think this is going great. We got a lot of positive feedback from the chat, Peter.
Yeah.
Even skeptics are commenting and saying that this is a very interesting talk. And so this is exactly what I wanted for this. And possibly we can turn this into a series, because we need more technical talks on this topic from the Young Earth Creationist side. And so since we have Homo habilis on the screen, I do have a question regarding Homo habilis. And so did you want to go through these slides?
Yeah, okay. Do you want the question, or do you want me just the question is to go through them?
Yes, let's just go right through habilis, because essentially the question is, what do we do with Homo habilis?
Okay, all right. So basically, the traditional evolutionary story is that Australopithecines evolved into Homo habilis, and Homo habilis evolved into Homo erectus. And so it has been or was an important stopgap or makeshift sort of missing link or transitional form between Australopithecine, the Australopithecines, and Homo erectus. I believe it's a phantom species. So even evolution it's variously described as a garbage bag, a grab bag, or a waste basket. Basically a dumping ground for difficult to classify fossils. And it appears to be more a composite genus, mostly of Australopithecines, that can be put into either an existing species of Australopithecines, or you put a separate species, but in the genus Australopithecus. And there are some few Homo erectus specimens also wrongly categorized, not many. Okay. Now, let's just get to the next slide. Okay. So, for example, in 1999, Wood and Collard suggested transferring Homo habilis to the Australopithecines. Now, Bernard Wood, he's a doyen, one of the kind of statesmen or elder statesmen of evolutionary paleoanthropologists. So basically, he's very knowledgeable, and he says Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, if you define them in a narrow sense, or Homo habilis sensus latu for those, basically if you define them in a more broad sense. So basically just explain that if you Homo habilis sensu latu means that you're broadly defining Homo habilis, which means Homo rudolfensis doesn't exist, it's incorporated into Homo habilis. If you're using the Homo habilis in the strictest form, then basically they create another species called Homo rudolfensis, which basically some of the specimens in Homo habilis sensu latu is transferred into that. Anyhow, he says regarding Homo habilis, the obvious taxonomic alternative, which is to transfer one or both of the taxa to one of the existing early hominin genera, is not without problems, but we recommend that for the time being, both Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis should be transferred to the genus Australopithecus. And more recently, actually, I did a review of this book, and it's being an upcoming Journal of Creation with Creation Ministry International. But Carmel and Smith, in this extensive analysis overview of the fossil record, they say concerning the classification of Homo habilis, that they would personally prefer to retain them in a paraphyletic genus Australopithecus until more is known about their anatomy and phylogeny. So they basically believe they should be put in the genus Australopithecus. And Bernard Wood sort of later, he's suggesting basically that it should be in 2014, so moving on a few years, they should be in their own genus basically, rather than Australopithecus, but not in Homo. He says, although Homo habilis is generally larger than Australopithecus africanus, and its teeth and jaws have the same proportions, what little evidence there is about its body shape, hands and feet suggests that Homo habilis would be a much better climber than undisputed human ancestor. So if Homo habilis is added to Homo, the genus has an incoherent mismatch of features. I just disagree, but I think you have to cherry pick the data to come to any other conclusion. My sense is the handyman should belong to his own genus, neither Australopith nor human. Okay, so basically, let me give you an example of one of the main specimens of Homo habilis. I mean, there aren't, well, there's some, but this is the KNMER 1470, sometimes known as 1470 man. It's been a very popular specimen by evolutionists and an icon, an ape-man icon, basically. And it has been problematic to classify both for evolutionists and creationists. And one of the reasons for that is that when originally put together, it was basically put together, the face was made really vertical and probably in an anatomically wrong position. And there was a lot of guesswork. And basically, that also made its brain much very large. And so originally, I think it was 800 or something cubic centimeters, and then they got it down to 752 cubic centimeters. And incidentally, a gorilla has also had a brain of 752 cubic centimeters, so that's not outside of the even extant or existing apes. But it was originally made to look as human as possible, according to Bromwich, who did this analysis. It was assembled with a relatively large brain and vertically oriented face. Now, the group by Bromwich did a computer reconstruction where it was given a more prognaathic face, where instead of the face kind of, I've got the skull here somewhere. Yeah, I can show it to you later. But it was giving. I don't know if you can see that here, but it was giving a more so that the middle of the face.
Actually, Peter, can you hold that up to the screen again?
Yeah, so you can see, because I'm not sure. I can't see anything, so I just see there. So this is 1470 man. So I don't know which how this reconstruction. It still looks quite vertical to me, but the actual new reconstruction was made to, I guess, made it more anatomical plausible, And so basically they used a formula, and I found came up with 625 cubic centimeters. Actually, I was reading in the literature, even quotes are basically in the 500s or something. But 625 cubic centimeters probably is a more reasonable estimate. Although they gave a final estimate of 700 cubic centimeters, but they didn't actually say. I'm not sure why, but I think it kind of would be upsetting to some evolutionists if I drastically reduce the brain size. But basically, just to give you an idea, one of the paleoanthropologists who was involved in the original reconstruction of the skull, the late Alan Walker, he was, I guess, worked with Richard Leakey, and so he was also now deceased. He disagreed with the original human-like facial reconstruction, the way it was oriented, because he found it was oriented in a position to emphasize the large brain and advanced human-like features of the skull. And he says, but I thought this was wrong. I wanted to swing the face out at an angle because to me, 1470's large face made it look like a big-brained Australopithecine. So he thought it was just a big-brained Australopithecine. And he said, I felt it rightly or wrongly that they were trying to squeeze the anatomy to fit their perceived theory rather than shaping the theory to fit the anatomy. He goes on to say, ideas are more flexible than bones, I have always found. And when you reverse the situation, you are heading into dangerous territory. So by reversing means that if bones becomes more flexible than ideas, then you're into dangerous territory where I guess you're interpreting things wrongly. And so he was one of the people that put it together. He disagreed with it. And he looked at it as a big brain Australopithecine. And I've also, this other specimen, I've already mentioned this when I discussed the afferensis analysis, and I found that its postcranial range was similar to the afferensis of being built for a tree lifestyle. And this is OH62 all the way hominid 62. And and according to Bernard Wood, the only postcranial fossils that can be assigned to Homo habilis with confidence are the postcranial bones associated with the type specimen OH7 and the associated skeleton OH62. Now, OH7 is the only ones really associated with this is some finger bones or hand bones, and they're not really that informative. You can interpret them pretty much anyway. I suppose they're not that informative. There are some other bones associated with in the area I found it, but I can't actually attribute it to OH7. So anyhow, so leave it. But the most informative about the skeleton is OH62, and basically it's a really extremely small individual, about I think it's about just over a meter or something, and basically so if you go on, so according to say Glenn Conroy, who I mentioned, in the paleoanthropologist Glenn Conroy, who I quoted earlier in regard to Lucy, OH62 is also more similar to African apes in limb proportion than Lucy is, and yet Lucy is more than 1 million years older than OH62 and is often considered to be ancestors to Homo habilis. Okay, so basically, I guess the words of Stephen Stanley, another evolutionist, probably the most relevant, he says, although living nearly 1.5 million years after Lucy, the OH62 animal was more ape-like in form than she. So basically, that's not a really good ancestor. It doesn't make for a great ancestor if your ancestor is more ape-like than the descendant. So basically, and the other one, so that would have been, I guess, so that would have been interpreting Homo habilis in a sense, a stricter way, in a narrow sense, where they divided up. And so let's look at Homo rudolfensis. But the problem is there are no postcranial range that can be reliably linked with Homo rudolfensis. That's according to Bernard Wood. And now there have been people like Stephen Stanley, who I just quoted about Homo habilis. He's attempted to link it with some human fossil like human-like fossil bones, say the hip bone, KNMER 3228, and two femurs, KNMER 1472 and 1481A, in order to make it a sort of purported viable evolutionary ancestor of Homo erectus. However, the problem is that these adult fossil bones, they're not associated with any cranial remains, and so they could resemble human bones because they are human bones, as they have all at one time or another been and still are affiliated with Homo erectus. So you can't really argue if they can be, you don't know who they're associated with, and likely could well be associated with Homo erectus. So basically, that means that you have this enormous morphological gap between the ape-like limb proportions, anatomy of the Australopithecines, including Homo habilis, which is anything is more ape-like, but let's just say it's similar to Australopithecines, because so I put it in a category, and the Homo erectus skeleton, which basically was essentially modern-like postcranially, and so maybe I'll get back to you now. I don't know whether you want me to continue with that or you want to take or not.
I do have one question, and you could keep your slide up if you'd like to as I ask you it, because
which one then? This one?
It has to do with habilis specifically. The question.
I'll get back to that. I'll get back. Which, that one or the?
Yes, maybe for now, just keep it there.
That one or that one on.
Okay. Yes, keep it there. It's mostly it's mostly an objection. It comes in from someone in the chat named Gutsit Gibbon, whose video I sent you dealing with Lucy's bipedality. And so her objection is that most of what gives Homo habilis the transitional status is in the skull, and therefore a composite would be difficult. And so I guess what are your thoughts on that comment, Peter?
Well, actually, I don't know if you can see this, but I've anticipated this a lot, and that's why I've gone through most of the main skulls that from Homo habilis that I use in that, and I go and look what evolutionists say about them, and basically you can put them in. A lot of them resemble with Australopithecus africanus, like the 1470 man has been compared to Cuniaphus platyops, which some evolutionists put in as in Australopithecus anyhow. And so you can a lot of the skulls you could even if you can't put them in an existing species of Australopithecine, they belong there, and a lot of evolutionists sort of find a lot of similarity with them, even some of the robust forms. So I would say no, it doesn't. And the 1470 man was kind of made to look more human-like than it was. So now there are some there are some instances, and I believe. Like the Debunking ones, the Hominin ones, although there's strange things about them, although the skull is some say it's more advanced than erectus. I don't know about that, but there are some robust skulls, but also which are very small. I think where it's because of the small cranial capacity, and I guess there's two things about that. One is I believe that some of the stuff you're looking at development pathology, like the Debunking skulls, I can put it. I got the. I'll just find it. I put it here somewhere. Here we are. So this is probably this is one of the ones, the skull 5. Okay, so this is really odd. Now I believe this was there's something odd about the Debunking finds. Now it was now that where it's found in the Caucasus in Georgia. If you look at a World Health the WHO report about goiter, that's an area where there's a lot of goiter. Where you have goiter, there's a swelling on neck, you have cretinism, and cretinism causes a lot of funny things, developmental effects in the bones, dwarfism, reduced brain size, and I believe some of these effects, they're not modern human forms, but they're robust humans. But the strange form could be related to that. But they are still the cranium is it's erectus like. It's not but I can see some think it is, but I believe there's pathology involved which have caused it to have some funny features. And a large jaw tends to be present in cretinism, and this one has a very large jaw. Okay, so I don't think we'll probably get time to get on the cretinism today, but maybe we can look at it another time, because I was going to look at that in conjunction with the Hobbit, Homo floresiensis, and Charles Oxnard. He's the one that makes him and his associates really make a great case showing how the Homo floresiensis was a human with cretinism. Now I believe, because it also has affinity with the Homo erectus skulls in Java, that it was not a modern human with cretinism, but likely a robust human with a erectus or heidelbergensis that had cretinism, and which explains his reduced brain size. And remember, there's populations in that area which have smaller brains as well. And the other thing is, people probably won't have time today, but brain size, there is no correlation between intelligence and brain size. So and people have these things that like, because we've talked mainly about the Australopithecines and stuff like that, so I haven't really gotten to it. Probably maybe another time. But and I've got a lot of quotes, but I won't show them because time is getting on. But in living humans, you can have 1,000 cubic centimeters difference in brain size, and there's no difference in intelligence. Okay, for example, Anatole France, he had a 1,100 cubic centimeter brain, cranial capacity. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. Not the Peace Prize, Nobel Prize for Literature. And then there was Leo Tolstoy, had a brain of 2,000 centimeter cubes, well, difference in 900 centimeter cubes. He was also a great writer in that time. Who's to say who was more intelligent? But there's 900 cubic centimeters in brain size, no difference in intelligence between them. That's more than 2 chimp brains. And so there is this problem. And so what evolutionists are saying, that the whole thing that made these hominids evolve was the selection for intelligence. Their intelligence drove brain size, but there is no basically selective value, particularly in the increments we're looking at. So basically, you're looking at increments of every 100,000 years. The increment, I believe, and evolutionists regard as rapid as 20 cubic centimeters of brain size evolved in 100,000 years. Now, I've done the calculations. That's a few pinheads of brain tissue per generation. Now, how is that going to make a difference if 900 cubic centimeters and modern humans don't make a difference? It's not. There's no selective value in it, particularly as they go on about how the brain uses up, is in terms of metabolism. It uses a lot of the resources of the body. It's very expensive, so it had to be a very good reason. And so, and to top it off, there's maybe I'll show you this. Because this is make people think about brains. I'll just show this slide here. This is about a guy called Dan. So let's see. Hang on, just get to it. All right. I don't slide. Okay, so this is by John Scholes, again, an evolutionist, but he got the information from an article by him. Now, Daniel Lyon was he had normal intelligence. But he had a brain smaller than Homo erectus, or most Homo erectus specimens. He was a non-retarded white watchman who worked for 20 years at the end of the 19th century in New York at the Pennsylvania Railroad Terminal. He could read, write, and according to legal representatives of the company that employed him, there was nothing defective or peculiar about him, either mentally or physically. He was an average weight of 65.8 kilograms and below average height of 1.55 meters. After he died at the age of 46 from bronchitis, they analysed his brain, okay, and it weighs just 680 grams, basically. And if you basically do the calculations of that, it basically, I was just trying to find out where I basically go with his brain size. Anyhow, I didn't. Oh yeah, down the bottom. So if you're using a formula linking brain volume to cranial capacity, you can calculate that Lion's cranium had a cranial capacity of about 660 cubic centimeters. Or if you estimate the cranial capacity directly from the brain mass given, not Squirrel's brain volume, it gives a cranial capacity of 694 cubic centimeters. Either way, that's very small, but that's basically that is a modern human, normal intelligence, and it's got this is a very small brain size, but the thing is also, it's even actually smaller because the only peculiar thing about when I did an autopsy brain was that the size of his cerebral hemispheres. So if I've got a brain here, sort of, okay, well, just a model. And basically, his cerebral hemispheres were actually even smaller for his already small brain. It was actually 371 cubic centimeters, or 128 cubic centimeters less than what you expect for the brain of his size. So basically, that's because the cerebellum, you can see the green things at the back, were so large. They were their normal size. And then our cerebellum gets input from the vestibular apparatus, and it's basically is involved in coordinating balance and things like that. It's also involved in coordinating learned movement patterns, such as gymnastic routines and things like that. So it's a very important center. But so the point is, humans could already if humans have normal intelligence with such a small brain, why would they sort of need, if evolution is true, why would they need to sort of develop a larger and larger brain? Because it wasn't like that they were developing space rockets back then in the alleged environment. So all I was doing was trying to survive. So a huge brain wasn't even necessary in that sort of environment. So again, it doesn't make sense, and that basically a large brain was even kind of needed, and how it basically and why would you evolve a large brain if there is no really link with it in intelligence anyhow? So there's all these conundrums and things. And my area of expertise is the brain,
Right.
And for me, it's the complex arrangement of matter in a known universe is inside your head, and it doesn't look like much, but it's the circuitry, and the information, how it gets transmitted. Even as we sit, you take everything for granted, but your millions of signals are sent, through your eyes, retina, through your optic nerve to the back of your head, into probably dozens of regions to basically what a signal that is basically just action potential currents, ionic currents, and the brain basically sends us to all its different regions that can get information about edge detection, color, things like that, and then send it to a region that merges all information and then merges from auditory input and all sorts of other sensory input in essentially in real time, maybe a few millisecond delay. Now, how on earth does non-intelligent pond scum do that without plan and purpose. I mean, humans can't design a brain thing like that. No, you know, this is why, you know, this is why I think this is probably the greatest evidence for design is this. And we don't even know the link between we learn a lot about how the physical brain works, you know, neurotransmitters, you know, action potentials, the circuitry, but how does that make you think? What are thoughts are non-physical? So how do you select for a mind which is non-physical? How does that work with, you know, this? How does that incorporate in the genome? You know, just, you know, how you know, and how do you basically? I think maybe I got another quote here.
I can put your slides back up on screen.
Just see if I can find it. Yeah, I'm just seeing if I got a quote here about the. I'm just trying to find it. I think something about the brain. Brain says, okay, the power of the human brain. So you have so basically here, James Lifano. So he has a book called How Science Rediscovered the Mystery of the Cells, and he says the twin and unfathomable profundities of nature and nurture. First, how just a few thousand genes might instruct the arrangement of those billions of neurons with their hardwired faculties of language and mathematics. And second, the physical basis of that all-encompassing property of neuroplasticity, by which the brain incorporates into itself the experience of a lifetime. So you have all these things that are not understood. The link between the brain and our thinking, you know, it's just so big, it's you know, and there's it's a very interesting area, and getting back, maybe a quote of, I think that I got to quote something. I think there was. I'm just looking for it's kind of been lost here, so I'm just trying to get something else. Narrative. Okay. All right. Now in I got just getting an. I don't know if you can see this thing here, but this was an American scientist, and again, Bernard Wood, who's a real expert in evolution, human evolution. He wrote an article with another author, Alexis Ulutko, an American scientist, recently this year, and basically he's talking about, if you're looking at stability uncertainty, basically it's not to be found in the tale of human evolution. And it talks about, so I'll just read a quote, accounts about popular evolutionary narratives. So let me just read. Such accounts generally offer a presentation of the fossil evidence of human evolution and a narrative describing how we gradually transformed from our ape-like ancestors via a series of intermediate forms into modern humans. Popular narratives on this topic generally include explanations about how, when, and why our human ancestors' posture became upright, their gait became bipedal, their diet shifted from vegetarian to a combination of meat and plants, and their brain enlarged. Okay, hang on. Unfortunately, it says, we have to disappoint me. I think that's, yeah. Unfortunately, we have to disappoint you. Although a narrative of this type will look like an accurate account of human evolution, it would almost certainly differ from the real evolutionary history. Instead, this article will lay out reasons for thinking that the existing human fossil record is incomplete in almost all respects, with little chance that any narrative explanation offered today can be the right one. If the human evolution story were a play or novel, many of its characters would be absent, misrepresented, or poorly developed, and the plot would have many holes. A straightforward account is elusive, however, because of two factors that inevitably complicate any attempt to reconstruct evolutionary history. What is missing from the fossil record and archaeological record, and the great variety of ways to interpret that record. So that's at least being honest. They still believe in evolution, and that sometime in the future the correct narrative will be found. But basically, it seems to be saying that well, whatever narrative is now is not going to be the right one. And so basically, to me, maybe why bother doing? I don't know if I should give I won't give my testimony, but why do that? Why bother this? Well, the thing is, there was an article in Future Human Evolution about some Sydney state students to ponder about how a drastic different future Earth could change humans. And I created this caricature of a creature called Hominin that rose from a change in Earth's gravity, and it looked grotesque. Okay, so to sum it up, what hope that our long-distance descendants will survive by evolving into a monstrosity that hangs upside down like a bat? And that really gets to what my thing is, that that there's only one reason to do it, that there is a different hope. If you look at human evolution, the experts are saying, well, we will work. Some maybe in the future something we worked out, but the story now isn't going to be right anyhow. But what I'm saying is there is a real hope. There is a real truth, and that is the only begotten Son of God, Jesus Christ. And so that's really the reason why I'm doing this, because I don't want people to just look at people. They may not know all the details, but look at skulls and think, that proves evolution to be true. No, it's not the case. There are very different interpretations of the skull, and as even an evolutionist said, the fossils are fickle. They can sing any song you want it to, so different interpretations can be made. Okay, so basically, there is real hope, but that is only in God, and that is where the truth be found. And I don't know whether I should briefly give my testimony or not, but it.
I was wondering if. No, we could certainly get your testimony, Peter. I'm wondering if the testimony. I'm wondering if. Yeah, you're coming in. I'm wondering if the testimony we can save that for the very ending, because I do have some audience questions, and your presentation was excellent.
Okay. Yep.
So your presentation was excellent, and I understand that on your end when you share screen. So I guess since we're mostly done with slides, if you click stop sharing, I think that actually might actually free up some more internet bandwidth for you on your end, because in addressing some of these questions,
shall I do that?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't need this slide. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
And if you do need the slides
sharing.
again, done. Thank you. If you do need the slides again, Peter,
I can set it up.
Yes, because I can already tell now that you've clicked stop share. I can already tell that it's kind of freed a little bit of bandwidth, because I think it'd be a good idea. I understand that you have the Lucy pelvis, the chimpanzee pelvis, and the human pelvis. And I think it'd be a good idea to show those on screen in order to address this question. And so we talked a lot about the possibility of the Australopithecines having a type of unique bipedality associated with them. And so here's the question. This is a question or objection from many in the evolutionist camp. And so I have it on screen. I'll read it. It says, a bipedal ape is a necessary prediction of evolution. Since Australopiths were bipedal and had a pelvis, amongst other bones, similar to humans, we've discussed a lot of those bones throughout the night. This is a fulfillment of that evolutionary prediction. And so what's a good way to respond or address that, Peter?
Well, you could say everything is an evolution prediction that, after the fact, of course you wouldn't expect if you basically if you're saying something transform into another, then you eventually at some stage you would have to have a human head, a human pelvis, or human feet, everything. So that's just a, you know, if evolution is true, but it presumes that firstly that God can't use similar design patterns. Sorry, yeah. Oh, so sorry, is the back? Sorry, there was just something arriving at the door.
No worries.
So yeah. So yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah. What was I talking about again? Because my wife just put me
a good way I can reiterate the question is the existence of Australopithecine like apes that were, or primates that could walk upright to a degree or in a unique way to humans. Is that consistent with the creationist model, or is it only consistent with the evolution model?
Well, I think it's very consistent because, like I say, I find it odd if there weren't sort of creatures that if God created all these diversity in primates, why is locomotion the only thing that he wouldn't create diversity? Or why would he create two legs if he meant them to walk on four all the time? And the thing is, the apes do walk, and even monkeys, they walk on two legs to some degree. And so to me, it's not really much an issue. But like I said, on examining the pelvis of Lucy, then it's not the same as the human one. Even, you know, it looks maybe superficially. If I hold them together, I don't know. But the thing is, like I said, it lacks the stabilization here between the elements of the sacrotuberous ligaments that bind the sort of ischium at the back here to the at the here, this region here to the sacrum up here, that binds that together. Evolution have examined the features on Lucy to say that they're not well defined on the sacrum, which means that these ligaments were poorly developed, which means that it didn't have the stabilization when you're standing erect, and that goes along with the small body here in the sacrum. So it means it wasn't meant to bear all the heavy loads as we do. And then the iliac blades is kind of, they don't curve around like humans, and that's a kind of, so it's more sort of, it's not the bowl shape. Humans the bowl shape. The Lucy ones is not, and I don't even know what this reconstruction is. So the thing is, it's kind of hard to show from this angle on the screen because but basically, yeah. So basically, the Lucy pelvis sort of, I've got okay. It sort of flares out more sideways, and it's kind of more wider, and it's more sort of, it's not sort of kind of, the blades don't curve around, so it becomes almost like in a sagittal orientation. The planes are more vertical. It's sort of more sideways, and that means the muscles, the gluteal muscles that kind of stabilize the body when erect positions, aren't able to do so that effectively. And there's other features as well. You know, the feature of the femurs are different. It's got a long neck, the femur of Lucy, again, and it's short. The legs are short, and the upper body is designed living in trees. So the thing is, and the problem is, so why? So to me, it's totally consistent with God designing creatures with diversity. And let me say that there's features of afferences in apes that existed millions of years before Lucy. Maybe I should go to that slide and I can show you. Should I put the presentation back on again?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
I'll just do that because it seems like it's a big thing. But let me just share this about.
It's definitely
a
big issue.
Share screen. Yeah, I'll just select to share. Okay, now I'll go to my final slide presentation. I'll go to the, just find, I've just got some things about, but, okay.
And just let me know when you're ready, Dr. Line.
All right.
Oh yes, these are some.
Well, maybe we can start this slide. So maybe I can go. So basically, John Rolfe, can you see it?
Yes, it looks great, Peter.
Okay. So John Rolfe is saying basically, in discussing general characteristics shared by all of the early hominins in his textbooks on anthropology, he's stating that they're all classified by the hominin because they show evidence, direct or indirect, of being bipedal. Although some, and as stated by Tracy Kibble, the commitment to terrestrial bipedalism characterized by skeletal adaptations of walking regularly on 2 feet is a defining feature that enables the assignment of fossils to the hominid lineage, which comprises all species more closely related to humans than to chimpanzees or bonobos, our two closest living relatives, according to her. So is that basically that bipedalism is the defining feature used by evolutionists to assign fossils to hominins or hominids. Now, and so basically you have this big promotion in books, magazine and stuff that ape-like creatures in Africa were on the way to becoming human because their fossils indicate they walk upright in some manner. Although a lot of these things like now, like Sahelanthropus judensis and things are disputed, but leave that aside. Now, and then in an article by Brian Hanback in the Smithsonian magazine says the long evolutionary journey that created modern humans began with a single step, or more accurately, with the ability to walk on 2 legs. One of our earliest known ancestors, Sahelanthropus, began a slow transition from ape-like movement from 6 million years ago. Some 6 million years ago, but Homo sapiens wouldn't show up for more than 5 million years. Now, leaving aside the fact that there's now doubt about Sahelanthropus, the sort of maybe falling off as I suppose our earliest hominin ancestor, according to evolutionists. However, my question is, what if apes living supposedly millions of years earlier in the evolution timeline than this already walked upright, yet that remained apes? Then bipedalism would be nothing novel. An animal like the apefish Australopithecines were likely, just like these other bipedal apes, simply an extinct group of apish primates unconnected to any supposed evolutionary lineage. And so here you have one such cave fossil of Aureopithecus bambuli. Now, basically the fossils, they're in the wrong location, Tuscany, Italy, the wrong time period at about 7 to 9 million years ago. And if you've got a brain size of just over 100 cubic centimeters, not many evolutionists are going to tout this as a missing link. Yeah. And so, but Aureopithecus shows a series of morphological features typical of living apes that reflect significant adaptations to vertical climbing. That's basically in the article by Curlo published on this, on the skeleton. In particular, it had a wide forearms, a short trunk, and a high intermembral index. That's comparing limb portions. Nevertheless, she said in the late 50s and 60s, some Aureopithecus characters basically were linked to bipedality. So the high epicondyle angle of the distal femur, relatively short hip bone, reduced distance insertion area of the sacrum or in the ilium acetabulum, that's the hip socket, and a hominid-like anterior inferior iliac spine. So basically, these sort of features were sort of thought to be kind of hominin features, but here they turn up in an ape. No one dispute it was an ape. And now the anatomy of the pubis and ischium, so that's the pubis here is the kind of red part at the front of the bottom front part of the pelvis of the Aureopithecus is said to be not ape-like, but the closely resembles in size and shape that of Australopithecus afarensis. So who would have thought, you know? So and And also the ischial spine is shown in the blue arrow. That's if you go to bottom diagram, that's posterior, is much larger than the apes, but identical to that of Homo. Now, I don't know what Homo they're talking about, humans or Australopithecines. I don't know, but basically, so these are features that you wouldn't expect in an ape. That was just an ape, you know. Now the mosaic pattern of its postcranial morphology is to some degree convergent with that of Australopithecus and functionally intermediate between apes and early hominids. So that goes on. The morphology of Australopithecus is not ape-like because it's functionally designed for habitual. Habitual means obligatory, or essentially out of habit, and not faculty, which is optional. Now, I don't know whether that's right or wrong. Like I don't know whether when evolutionists say that Lucy word habitually or faculty or it was just optional is wrong. But they're saying it was habitual terrestrial bipedal activities. But neither is it hominid-like, as the special environment conditions of the island engraved their peculiar traits. And in fact, the peculiar fleets were like tripods, and it had a widely abducted hallux. So basically, no one would believe this is hominid or hominin. But here you are. It has these features, hominid features, and bipedalism. This author saying they're habitual. And now, of course, well, when things like this occur, you've got independent evolution to the rescue. That, to me, there's two miracles of nature that involving bipedalism once is enough, but twice. Anyhow, it's so Henry Gee, who's a really evolutionist and anti-creationist, he said that basically what Australopithecus were bipedal to some extent, yet this creature is thought to have become bipedal independently and is only distantly related to hominids. So parallel evolution, basically, and that's the sort of get out of jail card when evolutionists generally find difficult problems, invent parallel or evoke parallel evolution. Now, of course, there's been some pushback, and so they re-examine stuff, and so Hammerell said, let's start about the bipedalism claims, and they say, although certainly more capable of bipedal post-ischial behaviours than extant grapes, it lacked features of low torso, rated biochemically efficient, habitual, and or obligate bipedalism hominids. But there's, even here they're admitting that it was still more bipedal than existing great apes. But the thing is that you get this, to me, I call it revision of morphology, that when it does something, it's going to be a problem from an evolution narrative. Somehow the morphology of the skeleton changes. It's kind of strange, They're saying bones are fickle, they sing any song you want. Okay, but that's one case. There's another case where Epipithecus hungaricus. I won't go through this one too much, but again, it had more in its pelvis. It had or hip bone. It had his hip bone had morphological features had to be rated to orthograde. That is standing or erect positional behaviours. And it would have differed from modern great apes by having a more flexible lower back, which would mean when Epipithecus came to the ground, it might have had the ability to stand upright more like humans do. So this was dated, evolution dated this 10 million years ago, and this was in Hungary. And another one is Danuvius Guggenmosi, if I pronounced that correctly. She described a bipedal baboon-sized fossil ape from Bavaria, Germany. It had a broad thorax, long lumbar spine, and extended hips and knees as in bipeds, and elongated and fully extended forelimbs as in all hominoids, which includes apes, or as in all apes, hominoids, whatever. Danuvius combines the adaptations of bipeds and suspensory apes and provides a model for common ancestors of great apes and humans. So here they believe it's distantly related to humans, but it was dated 11.62 million years ago. And according to discovery, it had unusual feature of an ape, that is the ability to stand straight with the knees and hips fully extended and lower back that curved gently to lend it stability. And she points out that ape-grade apes stand on 2 feet, they keep the knees and hips bent, and the lower backs are inflexible and too short for them to be able to stand upright with extended hips. So that's why I thought chimpanzees walk more awkwardly. Now, Tracy Kibble described the mosaic features of Danuvius as having Forelimbs suited to life in the trees that all living apes, including humans, still have. Lower limbs suited to extended postures like those used by orangutans during bipedalism in trees. So orangutans also walk bipedally in trees. And further specializations that features of the lower limbs in humans enable habitual terrestrial bipedalism. So again, habitual, which is like obligatory or out of habit. So again, they're saying this ape living all these years ago, not a hominin, walk habitually bipedally. But the foot has a long, robust, big toe that would be good for grasping, suggesting that the Gugunomosi might have walked flat-footed in branches. Whether or not it regularly walked bipedally on the ground is less clear. And Jeremy De Silva, who discussed earlier in regard to Afarensis, who's examined his fossil, he's an expert. He said the Bowman team concluded over 11 million years ago, Danuvius was upright and walked not on the ground but in the trees. But if Bowman is right, bipedalism did not emerge from ground up but from the trees down. From my observation of the fossils, I saw no reason to contradict his findings, but they remain controversial and contested. So this is kind of like what I'm basically sorry. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying there, is that there's these bipedal designs, according to evolutionists, in these creatures that were not hominins, dated millions of years before supposedly bipedalism evolved, and that they're described as having habitual bipedalism. So to me, I don't know whether it was or not. Like, I don't know whether it was in Lucy or not. And the thing is, even gibbons can run bipedally. So but the thing is, I don't see anything unusual about God using variation in the design pattern and using humans on other primates, or variation, diversity. What is two legs are generally for walking. So I don't have there is no problem. There's nothing in the Bible about it. And evolutionists might say they predict this and that. Okay, that's fair enough, because but the thing is, the Bible doesn't say. Bible, it also fits very much the Bible. And the thing is, I think I said at the start, you can't disprove, or I don't know, I was saying it now, you can't prove or disprove evolution by looking at bones, because that's not where it's at. But it is great propaganda value. But where evolution is disproved is at the level of molecular biology, genetics, and probability, irreducible complexity of biochemical systems, the almost infinite complexity of the brain. But if you do the probability, I won't go and show the slide, but you can do the probability. It doesn't matter how you do it, it's impossible. And that's the thing that evolution has got to convince it is if all probability is against these mutations being fixated in the time available, in fact, in the time available in this unit, in lifetime of this universe, is in how many universes you'd want, it wouldn't happen. And the thing is, we won't get into genetics, but the differences between, even if, say, it's a wrong figure, there's a 1% difference between humans and chimpanzees. That's 30 million base pair differences. And in in the time of the world, then that's supposedly 15 million base pairs have been co-opted into the human genome in 6 million years. Now, basically, the most you can get in a kind scenario is you could probably fixate maybe 1,000. So you could fixate 1,000 point mutations into the human genome in 6 million years, because it's a long, durable process, and you have all sorts of selection interference and all this stuff. But what about? But that's nowhere near enough to turn a chimp into a human. And in fact, that single point mutation, most structures or changes would need a lot of mutations at the same time. That's what makes it impossible. There is not the time in this universe or any other universe for that to happen, and so basically, but according to, and the thing is, the pelvis in humans and chimps aren't the same. because humans generally, if they're not pathological, like the sacrum, the lower lumbar vertebra, they're more larger to absorb the shock of the heavy loads. The muscles, the gluteal muscles can the iliac blades extend around more forward, so the attachment area of the gluteal muscles are more laterally oriented, so they can balance when you're in upright position. And there's also some things about things needed in terms of ligaments and things like that in the bones and structures in humans that would be needed to turn Australopithecus into human. And I have slides on it, but it's getting very long, and my wife is kind of telling me to stop. So basically, it's something I could in the future look more into, the probability of stuff and things like that. But yeah,
absolutely.
But I think hopefully you get the message.
Yes, it's been a very scholarly presentation. You've been very comprehensive, and this is exactly what I hoped for, Peter. I'm wondering, should we, because I want to respect your time, should we save Littlefoot for a follow-up show? Because I do have a lot of questions on Littlefoot.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what your opinion was. Should we save those details for a second show?
Yeah.
Or discuss it now?
I guess I could go into more detail, but I essentially Littlefoot is a nearly almost articulated skeleton, a lot, but it's sort of embedded in rock, and it took about 20 years to get it out. But it's sort of similar. That in fact, the critical part on that of the pelvis, it's not that well. There hasn't been a lot published on it, and it might not have been preserved as well, so it's hard to say. But from what I gather, it's probably not that different to other Australopithecines, and it probably is a variant of Australopithecus africanus. I noticed that when Clark renamed, put the, I think STW4573 is the code name for the specimen. When he named it in a species, Australopithecus prometheus, he took some specimens of Australopithecus africanus with him and put it in there, which indicates there's a close connection between Africanus and Prometheus, and so I don't, and so it's probably more of the same. Littlefoot, I think the interpretation that they had a divergent toe is again revisionist morphology, because Clark and Tobias, which sort of experts in the area, they have had it as a divergent big toe in the initial publication. I tend to go with more that the bones haven't changed in time, but the narrative may have changed by others, So yeah.
Okay, so you would go with the original publication that had the toe more divergent rather than convergent, like the evolutionists are currently arguing?
I got a slide showing it, but there's no point. It's more divergent. But the thing is, you can interpret, say the bones can sing any song you want, large to some degree, and so if they want, and because they're so keen on having, that the Afarensis footprints were made by the Latole footprints were made by Afarensis or some Australopithecine, then it's important that these non-opposable toe was evolved early on to them. So that, I think that's the push for it, And so the narrative changes, and so the interpretation of the bones kind of changes too.
What if a critic were to say the original publication at that time, they didn't have as many bones as they do in more recent publications, and so now with more bones, they've been able to conclude better that the toe is more in line rather than divergent? What would be a good way to respond to that?
Well, I'll just look up because I think the article by Di Silva in the Scientific American has what, if I can find it. That's wrong. The wrong one. I've got to find. Hang on. Just find it. I had the magazine here, but it must have. Oh, here it is. Hang on. No. Just see if I can find it again. There was a note sitting here. Disappeared. I don't know. No, hang on. Where you didn't pick up anything here, did you? I'm just trying to.
Okay. As Peter's oh, I think we got Peter back. I was going to address one of the questions, but if you're back, Peter, let me.
So basically, I'm looking at the little foot here, and if I'd have to go to the I'm not so sure that the let me just check for a second. I'm just checking something. Just checking. See if we can find. Somewhere. Got a slide somewhere of it. Should be that other for it. Just what happened to the slide?
Peter, did you want to give me the thumbs up when you're ready for it? And I'm going to address one of these questions here that have been directed at me. Currently, you're on mute, but maybe give me the thumbs up when you found what you need to find. And that way I'll just engage the audience for a second. So take your time. And then when you're ready, just feel free to unmute yourself, because I want to address this question real quick. So Creationist Crybaby says, different lines of evidence give the same hierarchy of the tree of life, whether we look at morphological, biochemical, or genetic traits. And so my response would be, yes, there's a general hierarchy in the created order, where humans are more similar to one creature than they are to another. So for example, humans would be more similar to chimpanzees than they are to a dog. So there's a natural hierarchy in the created order, but we can find many inconsistencies in that hierarchy. For example, the existence of orphan genes. They're these taxonomically restricted and essential genes. There's no consistent hierarchy in orphan genes. We could look to the Y chromosomes of humans and your great apes. And it actually turns out that when you consider overall gene content, architecture, and size differences, the human Y chromosome is more similar to the gorilla Y chromosome than either are to the chimpanzee Y chromosome. As a matter of fact, the human Y is only about 40% the same as the chimpanzee Y. And so there's incredible dissimilarity. One last example is convergent evolution, the independent origin of these traits. Anytime an evolutionist invokes convergent evolution to explain the origin of a trait, this is an admittance into the lack of uniqueness of the universal phylogenetic tree. And so, yes, in a nutshell, there is a general hierarchy, but there also exists many inconsistencies in that hierarchy. And so I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
Peter, if you're ready to go, brother, I can hand it back to you.
Yeah, so basically, in regards, I just sometimes when I do this, it's sort of unresponsive. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Peter. Did you want me to share your screen? I do see a slide at the bottom here.
I'll just go. I think, yeah. So can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, so these are gibbons. Okay, so these can move bipedally, and then and basically they compared. A study compared the existing apes and including the lesser apes and gorillas chimpanzees and orangutans, whatever. And I find that gibbons were significantly more bipedal and engaged in bipedal locomotion more frequently and for greater distance than any other primate sample. Now, apparently there's a group of New World monkeys that are designed a similar sort of a combination of lumbar spine and decisional behavior to gibbons, so that might be another one that's very bipedal, but we just don't know. Yet we can basically the study is saying we can't also ignore these data demonstrating high elevated. The only primates in our study were long lumbar region and orthograde body posture, essential characteristics of upright walking humans, practice bipedal locomotion more frequently and for longer distances than other non-human primates. And they say gibbons have relatively long, powerful lower limbs. The same number of lumbar vertebrae humans have, greater apes have fewer, and chests of humanoid configuration. When walking on the ground, gibbons stand up straighter than chimpanzees, which are occasionally bipedal. So here you could argue, if you're talking about locomotion, then gibbons should be around, so they're not chimps. So that, not that they are, but I'm just saying, if the reasoning is comparing similarities, given humanoid body form is more similar than chimps in terms of locomotion, the lower back and stuff, and it's the way it walks, and a way to walk bipedal, but it's on a lot more distant on the evolutionary tree. So even bipedally, it doesn't match up, and things like that, and then. So and apparently some monkeys are like that too, but I'm not sure. I haven't been sure. I'd have to look into that. So basically, I think a lot of these patterns just come after the fact, and if I don't fit the pattern, then, like I said, it's convergent evolution or parallel evolution or independent evolution, whatever you want to call it, make up for kind of very, very difficult things. I mean, I think. I would rather explain that than be in a position to explain what you see in nature. You know, the range of creatures, and sometimes, you know, like from the great whales to the fish to all sorts of, even the butterfly. I have an interest in butterflies, and basically the miracle there when it goes through its, you know, stages from the egg to pupa to larva, then the adult form. It's a miracle there when it emerges, you know. So I would rather have you know, to me that's the great explanation. How did these all processes come together? How did there's no intelligence involved, and how you have to fixate all these stuff in the genes, and how do you do that by trial and error? There's just not the time for it, you know. So, you know, but probably I'm not the best person to argue for that. There's probably other, whether creationist or intelligent design theorists, that would probably know a lot more about that and could give a lot more arguments. Probably yourself as well. But from just a human, from the hominid fossil record, I don't even think it matches that, because depending on, if you're looking at genetics, yes, chimps are more similar, but in terms of locomotion, gibbons, you could argue, are more similar. So that doesn't match. So that is a thing there. But even the chimps, really the difference is not 1%, perhaps 5%. But if Jeff Tompkins is right, it could be 15%. You know, even at 1% there's no chance. But the much larger difference is, you know, it just makes the impossible more impossible.
Amen. I'm a strong proponent of the genetic data as the best way to answer this question of ancestry, but also provide us discriminatory lines of evidence to answer the ancestry question. So, Peter, that's why I'd like to ask you, in light of everything we've discussed over the last 3 hours, and I got to say 3 hours has flown by. We've still got a great audience with a lot of positive feedback. At best, with bipedal Australopithecine primates, is this a non-discriminatory piece of evidence for the evolution side. And what I mean by that is, sure, they may have expected upright walking apes in the hominin fossil record, but it is not a discriminating point in the sense that the creation model can also explain the data.
Definitely.
It fits neatly in our model.
Definitely. I mean, if God created humans to walk upright, why on earth? And the thing is, throughout animal life, God, you know, a lot of creatures have two eyes. I mean, because God created humans two eyes, I mean, other animals can't have two eyes. It's a similar thing. God can use, no, He may create things slightly differently, and that's what we see in nature, and that's what we see between humans and primates, you know. And I don't see to me, it's a non-issue because the Bible is silent on it, and the thing is, even if you look at it, the pelvises are not the same. I know, and the thing is that if this is all they're hedging their hat on, it's not. You know, it's kind of, it's very sad because you know, it just you don't I don't find it convincing. And even if they walked Australopithecines walked upright similar to humans, all I would say is, well, that's interesting, but so what? They don't have a human brain, but they don't, you know. But you know, I think it's become too much of an issue for creationists because I think in the early days there were no so-called bipedal apes before, in the evolution time, before the Australopithecines, and they were very defensive on this issue. But I don't think there is any need to be that defensive. I think you've got to look at, you know, to me it makes common sense. God creates primates two legs. They have two legs are for walking on. So it makes sense that He uses variation in that pattern, and that's what you see. That there's a great variation in the way primates walk, and I don't see from the morphological data that any walk like humans. Even if I did, that what would it prove? That God used the same pattern in some primate, but he seems like He is created different because to survive, these primates had to be able to live in the trees, basically, because they wouldn't survive. As I mentioned in the environment, the evolutionists suggest there was a lot of predators out there, so He knew they had to be adapted to live in the trees, and so they wouldn't have had the. And if you're going to be fully effective as a tree-living primate, I don't see how you could have a human-like walk like a human with long legs and a human pelvis, because that probably would be a disadvantage in the trees. You know, you need some more flexibility there. You know,
right?
And you couldn't have a human feet because.
Right. I was going to say, I agree. Similar archetypical designs because we live in the same environments, we live in the same world, and it reminds me of a question I'd like to ask you, because you showed the Lucy pelvis earlier, and you've been very comprehensive on the Lucy topic. But many creationists don't believe that the reconstructed hip of Lucy is accurate. What is a good position? Is it accurate? Should we hold to a different position, in your opinion?
Like I said, I honestly don't know. I've seen the video where I think a lot of creation referring to a video by, I think the Johansson group or Lovejoy, I don't know who it was, but they were got a cast of the pelvis part and kind of did some cutting of it, and then fitted it to the hip to make it a more human-like orientation, because I said it was an anatomically impossible position. Now that latter statement might be correct. Whether their position is correct, I don't know, but they tend to be very much the Afarensis walks like human group, so that makes me a little bit suspicious, you know. And that's why I say I don't know whether the bones, how accurate that reconstruction is, because it has to be based on something, you know. And so I don't honestly know. But even as it is, it's not human. It's not the same as human. Like I said, Donny, you may get flaring of the ilia in pathological humans, like in cretinism, and there are a lot of pathologies that give you things like that, but not in normal humans usually don't usually get that like that. So yeah,
Peter,
and there are like I said, there's features on it that indicate the lower vertebrae and the top of the sacrum were not adapted to carry heavy loads, and so that means they weren't walking all the time. They certainly weren't running, and it'd probably be more designed for living in the trees. But they would use that to walk in the trees for hand-assisted arboreal bipedalism. But if you can walk on a branch of a tree, you probably can walk on the ground if you had to. Like I said, gibbons, when they stay mainly in trees, if they get on the ground, they can run bipedally. So so there's not an issue there.
I'm not sure if you have the time. And again, I want to respect your time. So we could save this for another show, but I've got a lot of questions and we didn't really get the time that we wanted to discuss Homo naledi. And so should we cover that briefly or should we save that for a follow-up show? Totally up to you, Dr. Lyon.
Maybe the way my wife is looking at me, probably save it for a follow-up.
We could certainly save it for another show.
Probably was a bit of detail, so that will go for quite a while.
I think we could probably do an entire show on naledi.
There's been a lot of there's been a lot of controversy lately and there's a lot of infighting among evolution themselves about the latest findings. I think so. There's a lot of interesting things that come out of that. But you probably need more time, and I think we'll probably
I think what we'll do, Peter, I think what we'll do is wrap it up at the 3-hour mark. This is more than enough information for our awesome audience to digest. And then you and I, my brother, will chat through email and we'll work on setting up a part 2 where we can get.
Sure.
Actually, I think what we can do, Peter, because we really focused on the Australopithecines tonight. And so maybe a second show, we can focus more on the Homo genus, Neanderthals, Erectus, Hobbit, and naledi. Okay.
That'd be probably better. Because we don't need to cover the same territory.
Well, Dr. Lyon, fantastic work tonight. This has been a great show. I look forward to re-listening because you've given us so much great information, so many great visuals, and a very scholarly presentation. So I do want to hand it to you in case you had any final words, final thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with.
I think probably given no, but I'll probably leave for now. I'll if I give I can give my testimony another time. I don't know. So we'll leave it for now. It's not. Sorry. Yeah. Well. The thing is, I'll give it in a nutshell. What I used to say the Lord's Prayer every night, but I wasn't a Christian. Even though I gave my life to Jesus as a kid, I was someone to say all you have to be is good. And so that's only convenient. So I just lived being good, although I wasn't good. But when I was in my mid-20s, I still say the Lord's Prayer every night. And I was into triathlons. And I remember, and I thought God doesn't cheat. But if you're asking something sensible, so I asked God, give me strength to train for this event. I had the world's richest first prize in this back in 1985, $20,000 Australian dollars was a lot of money. So I said to God, so one day I said to God, and if I come in the top 3, I'll never deny you exist. To cut a long story short, I came second, lost by 3 minutes. Maybe I should have said if I was. You're still there?
Yes.
But anyhow, a few months later, I was out training on bike. I was thinking about that. What I said to God, I said, I won't deny you exist. And then I thought, well, but I was about to study university. I didn't know much about science, and I said I was a mature age student. And then I said, but my problem was, if scientists say we evolved from the pond scum, the fish, the amphibian, the reptile, the apes to man, and you say you create us from dust to the ground. How can that be true? They're mutually exclusive, and I wouldn't want to waste my life believing in a false religion and a cult. So I said, if you really are there, God, you have the power to solve this problem for me. And I left it at that, forgot about it. A university has started some months later, I got interested in looking at the origin of life, and I found that no one really had a clue, but I was interested in it. And I went to a lecture series on origins, and I thought it was an evolution, but it was by a creationist called, and I was showing Dr. Wilder Smith, with 3 doctorates in chemistry, and he was talking about natural selection and mutation. I thought he was going to blow the evolutionary trumpet, but he explained why it was wrong. It didn't explain evolution, and that's when the scale dropped from my eyes. I really got to answer my question in this way. And so that's when I became a creationist, but I didn't become a Christian. And so later, but I started reading things, but I remember I was in Los Angeles in early July 1986, and I had, my life was good. I didn't feel like I needed God. I thought everything's fine, but I had this kind of probably a sobering dream. I haven't really shared it publicly, but maybe I should. Just a brief. There was this film, I hadn't seen it, I heard about it, called The Never Ending Story, and there's this creature in this film. And I was a person never could remember any dreams, but this one I really did. And I was flying on this creature around the world, seeing all this beautiful scenery and thinking, wow. And then it suddenly stopped somewhere, and I saw in a distance this golden lake, and I thought, that's interesting. And then it took me closer. I thought it was like a molten gold, and I could see movement. Then it took me closer, and then I saw, no, it wasn't molten gold. There was hands and arms sticking out, a bit like a sea of hands and arms, a bit like you see in a rock concert. And then I almost slipped and fell in. I managed to hang on. And then I woke up. Now, I didn't really know much of theology. I think I probably read somewhere there was a lake of fire, but I didn't picture hell as a lake. But all I could think about, so I wasn't sure what to make of it then because of lack of knowledge. But all I could think about that day was, I could live and have a good life up to I'm in the 60s and then give my life to Christ. But there was no guarantee I'd be here tomorrow. And I spent eternity hell kicking myself because I didn't make the decision when I could. And so I decided then that nothing in this world was worth losing my soul over, going to hell over. And so I committed my life to God. So it wasn't through going to church or anything like that. But it's based on self-preservation. And so that's my testimony. So, but it gets back to the creation issues, what makes me believe in God. But ultimately, there's a bigger important message here, that, in itself, whether you creation evolution, if you don't know Christ, then it's all pointless. That
Amen.
So that's the kind of message I want to share, and basically, yeah. So that it does have, what you believe does have consequences, and so yeah. So that
Amen.
So it's a kind of sobering thing, but maybe, yeah.
That is an awesome.
I believe
testimony.
that I escaped that destiny, but God was showing me where I was heading, and so I escaped that destiny, and God's mercy and grace, and that's available to everyone, no matter what you've done, that's available to everyone, free gift of eternal life. That's such an amazing thing, and yeah.
Amen.
So maybe I'll leave it there.
No, that's an amazing testimony. Our beliefs have eternal consequences, as you pointed out, Dr. Line. And eternity is a long time. We're only here on this earth for a very short amount of time. And so there's nothing more important than our eternal destiny, which is why we encourage all of those who have not yet put their faith and trust in the risen Lord. Dr. Line, I appreciate your testimony. And again, lots of positive feedback from the chat with many more questions coming in. So I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic, Peter. So I will talk with you through email, and we'll set up a part 2. I'll allow you to get on with your day. I am just going to stick around just myself, going over some announcements for people for upcoming shows. And so, Dr. Line, God bless you. I really appreciate all of the time you've given to us.
Thank you. We'll be in touch, huh?
Okay, we'll be in touch. You have yourself a great day, Peter. Okay, well, that was awesome. That went even better than I expected. I wanted a comprehensive show. Now, I think we were too ambitious in what we wanted to discuss, because we wanted to get into not only the Australopithecines, with a strong focus, of course, on Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, but also on Naledi, Neanderthals, the Homo genus, and what explains a lot of the atypical or anomalous features associated with Naledi, Neanderthals, Erectus, so on and so forth, Hobbit. And so I've got a ton of notes and slides myself. I've given a presentation on Naledi maybe a month ago that I highly recommend people check out. But Dr. Line and I, we've been communicating for a while now through email. And so this is good. This has turned into a series, as we have gone 3 hours and 15 minutes. And so lots of information for people to enjoy, to absorb, and to digest. And so currently I am thinking a part 2 would be suitable in October. And so a month from now. And we'll specifically focus on objections to this show, objections and criticism. So for those in the chat, or for anybody who has watched this show and they do object or have any follow-up points or questions to anything Dr. Peter Line has said, reach out to me, standingfortruthministries@gmail.com. And what I can do is relay those points and challenges to Peter. And so that'll give them a month or so to look them over, and then make some slides and develop some adequate responses to those. So again, yeah, reach out if you got questions ahead of time that you want to make sure Peter gets to, then send those in. Doki Doki Bible Club says, not bad for a first SFT stream. Yes. 3 hours seems to be just the average now, or the minimum, especially when we compare them to our open mics. Now, the next, for sure, open mic, the one set in stone in terms of evolution, will be October 5th. Okay. That is going to be Kent versus Luca, and then open mic after that for another 4 hours. Now, in the meantime, I may try and find an impromptu time to do an open mic with myself. I'd love to do an open mic on the chromosome 2 fusion, junk DNA. Matt and I want to get together in October for an open mic titled Adam and Eve Exist, Prove Us Wrong. So I think that would be fun. And we would spend some time going over the scientific evidence for a literal Adam and Eve. And then we would open up the mic for any critics to join. I'm also chatting with many in the evolutionist camp to have some informal debates on ERVs, some informal debates on junk DNA, genetic entropy. And so I've left October with a few more gaps in dates than I usually do, because from May till September, I just packed every single week with 5 shows. I mean, this week we've got 5 shows. And so it was a little more difficult to go live for impromptu streams, since we were basically streaming every day as it is. But for October, November, I have intentionally booked shows in a way that leaves us with a couple days here and there to do some impromptu streams. An example of that was last night. I went live with Jackson Rowe. And so if you haven't yet seen that, please do check it out. We had an impromptu debate or discussion on genetic entropy, and it was just an hour and a half straight of a discussion on the topic. And so I enjoyed that. I think that was a lot of fun. Okay, so tomorrow we will be back here for another show, this time a debate. So we kicked off the week, aliens, UFOs, and the Bible. This was an excellent presentation, and then post-presentation discussion with Helmut Welk. If you haven't yet seen that, please do check it out. Today, of course, examining the evidence for human evolution. I understand this was a technical show, but that's why we doing this full time, thanks to our supporters. This is a listener supported ministry. So if you do want to help continue helping us put out full-time content, consider supporting us through Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can gain access to early release episodes of my 3 new series going on: Debunking R and Ra on Adam and Eve, addressing William Lane Craig and theistic evolutionism, and also my new series on the Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook, a walkthrough through that book. And so that helps us reach everybody with some great guests on all sorts of topics. We want to give you a diversity of topics. So this one was technical but needed, because I feel we need more comprehensive shows on the hominin fossil record from a young earth creationist perspective, and not just touching on the basics or the bigger picture, which is important, but we want to get into the details. And I think that's what this show, a first show in a series of shows, has done. Okay. So tomorrow, again, the great eschatology debate. We will be having Kirby Tab, pastors Kirby Tab and Scott Clem. And so we are going to be, I'm looking at Joel Duff says, I will say SFT beats RNC debate in terms of quality content. Maybe because I haven't had anything to eat in the last 4.5 hours. I can't remember what RNC is, but I will take that as a compliment. I appreciate it. Joel Duff, Dr. Joel Duff, he's joined our last, at least 2 of our last open mics, and Sam and I both, we enjoyed Joel's company, and I really hope Joel joins some more, because I personally want to have some discussions with Joel on created heterozygosity. I'm going to send Joel a created heterozygosity shirt. He's earned it. He deserves it. And I appreciate the input and the feedback from our critics. I do my best to listen to what the critics are saying. I do my best to study what the critics are saying, and then incorporate shows that are related to challenges that the critics are advancing. And that was partly why I believe this series with Peter Line is important. So anyways, tomorrow, pastors Kirby Tab and Scott Clem, they will be, okay, there we go. Paleo Logo says, definitely not the Republican National Convention. Okay, there we go. Yeah, they're definitely not hosting debates on evolution, eschatology, soteriology, nature of God, which reminds me, our September main event is this Saturday. This is going to be a big one, ladies and gentlemen. Kelly Powers and Sean Griffin. The Great Nature of God debate. Is the Trinity biblical? Kelly Powers and Sean Griffin. Kelly from Berean Perspective Apologetics and Sean Griffin from Kingdom in Context. So this is a debate that's been in the making for a while. So make sure you're here for that. Saturday, Friday, we've got a soteriology debate for you. So a little bit of everything. Then once October starts, boom, we're right back at it. The Great Exodus debate, Grayson and CJ Cox. I am excited for this. I've not seen too many debates on this specific topic. So I am interested to see what Grayson and CJ Cox will be bringing to the table. Grayson and I are also chatting behind the scenes about getting a one-on-one, me and him chat on the technical aspects of genetic entropy. That reminds me, Paul Price and myself, we're going to be doing a show either this weekend, if we can squeeze it in. It'll probably be, it may be pre-recorded or we'll do it live. I'm not sure, but it is going to be about an hour review of Dr. Zach Hancock's review of Dr. John Sanford's book, Genetic Entropy. And so Paul Price has been putting a lot of stuff together on that. And so we will be getting that out to you as quickly as possible. Again, possibly if we can squeeze it in on the weekend, but we've already got 5 shows this week and a lot of projects behind the scene that we're working on. So we'll see. Worst case scenario next week. Either way, you're going to be able to see it at some point in the next week or two. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I just finally finalized the details on a eschatology panel discussion / debate for October. So October 16th, I'm excited for this. We've got Sam Frost. We've got Scott Clem, Anthony Aquino, Thielen McFallon, and also Daniel Eldridge. And then I'll be hosting. So 6, including me, eschatology panel discussion. I've made sure to bring in guests of all different views: amillennialism, pre-tribulation rapturism, post-tribulation rapture, various forms of preterism, not full preterism for this one, but partial preterist related positions. So we're going to have most positions in terms of eschatology represented in this panel discussion. I think it's going to be great. Also, in October, I've got Michael J. Ord. He's going to join us. And when he joins us, he's usually here for 2 to 3 hours. But this time, so Mike Ord, he's been a blessing. He's given us 11, I think, detailed presentations and discussions so far over the last 2 years of working together. And so for October, Mike and I were talking, and we think it's a good idea to do just a show comprising audience questions. And so I'm going to send him a few detailed questions ahead of time. And that way he can put together some slides, you know, maybe Joel Duff, the Pompeii or the Permian Pompeii. That might be a good question for us to address. Regardless of what questions we address, October, we've already got a book. It's going to be about 2 to 3 hours of just audience questions. Again, if you have questions or challenges that you want to send me through email that I can send Mike ahead of time, please do so. And then we can be prepared with some visuals. I think that'd be fun. And then I've also got Dr. Jerry Bergman's coming back on in October, and he's going to be presenting on his new book, which I ordered, should be in the next couple of days. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's called Why Did God Create Viruses, Bacteria, and Other Pathogens? And you can find that book on Amazon, just recently released, Dr. Jerry Bergman. And so he's going to be here in October to present on that topic and then answer audience and host questions. Guitar tunings, thank you very much for the super chat. Paleo Logo says he's going to go watch from the beginning. Yes, anybody who's recently just joined, make sure to watch from the beginning. We went for we went for about 3 hours. Doki Doki Bible Club. Yes, great question. Great question. We were just talking about that actually last week. And so I've been having a lot of meetings behind the scenes with people. So Defending Genesis Conference 2022, last year was in September. Week-long conference, speakers every day, 2 speakers a day. But each session some of those sessions went 3.5 hours, and then we wrapped it up with a debate. This year, we're thinking of wrapping up the whole conference with an open mic, but we'll see how we feel after the 5 days of events. So this will be most likely in November, it looks like. So rather than September last year, Defending Genesis Conference this year will be in November, week-long conference. I'm also in talks with many of our favorite Trinitarian apologists. And so we are hoping in October to have several days, October or November, several days of defending the Trinity with Anthony Rogers, Dr. Michael Burgos, Matt Slick, if he's available, Dr. Edward Dalcour. Regardless, just a solid Trinity event or nature of God event. So good question, Doki. I'm glad you asked it. Okay, I wanted to look at the remaining questions here and see if there are anything here. Call me emo. Good to see you. Call me email just jumped through a wormhole. It's been a while, but I hope you've been well. And so I think this is in response to my nested hierarchy response. He says, inconsistencies question. Evolution predicts a nested hierarchy that is concordant with the mechanisms of evolution, not a perfect one. Okay, not a perfect one, but again, the inconsistencies, if they are representative of discriminatory lines of evidence or data that only the creation model can explain, which I would argue is the case for the Y chromosome dissimilarity. I mean, I've been debating the Y chromosome dissimilarity for the last 3 years with serious students of evolution, with PhD evolutionists. And so, sure, many examples possibly in terms of incomplete lineage sorting, the evolutionists may have a consistent explanation for. But I do strongly believe that there are several data points that the evolutionary model does not have a good explanation for. When it comes to Y chromosome dissimilarity as 2020 and there hasn't really been too many sophisticated responses since then. Those in the evolutionist camp, they have pointed out that their explanations for the Y chromosome dissimilarity are currently untested hypotheses. And so until your hypotheses are tested, it remains in the realm or the world of pseudoscience. Gutsa Gibbon had several good comments about discriminatory versus non-discriminatory lines of evidence, because in the creation versus evolution debate, there is a lot of overlap. And what I mean by that is a lot of observations, a lot of the lines of evidence that we debate in this controversy are consistent with both models. Both models expect a homology. Both models expect nested hierarchies. Sometimes I feel like I'm being too gracious to the evolutionists, though, because at the end of the day, when it comes to homologous patterns, why is there any similarity at all in the evolutionist model? If evolution is true, deep time evolution is true, and we've been accumulating mutations for millions of years, okay, from pre-ancestors, descent with modification, then any real similarity, especially in your non-coding regions of the genome or areas of the genome that evolutionists say are unconstrained or non-conserved, those accumulate mutations unchecked, as in they're not subject to purifying selection, okay? Because most mutations are just nearly neutral. They accumulate and selection can't see them, and so they're subject to genetic drift. And if deep time evolution is true, those long time scales, well, what does that mean? That means there's a mutation drift equilibrium where the effectively neutral mutation rate equals the long-term substitution or fixation rate. So if the mutation rate is 50 mutations per person per generation, then the fixation rate is 50 mutations becoming fixed in a population of, say, 1 million every single generation if deep time evolution is true. And for most of evolutionary history, they would not hold to a human population of 7 to 8 billion people. Again, they would not hold to a position of 7 to 8 billion people. The population, according to the evolutionary model, has only grown exponentially in recent history. Okay. But going back further than that, they argue that the population remained 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. And so again, if the evolutionary model, which means you'd have faster rates of fixation. So point is, if evolution is true, nearly neutral mutations accumulate, they're subject to genetic drift, they drift randomly, and then many are lost, yes, but many reach fixation. And so what that would do is alter any nested hierarchical pattern, any homologous signature. If deep time evolution is true, why is there any homology at all? Why are there nested hierarchical patterns in the biological world? Because again, these mutations that accumulate should have wiped out or scrambled those homologous and nested hierarchical signatures. Okay, the creationist model predicts and expects homologous patterns because human engineers design in homologous patterns. Human engineers design in nested hierarchical patterns. Okay, this is consistent with the design hypothesis. But again, the evolutionary model, if those deep time timescales are true and accurate, mutation accumulation, genetic drift, and fixation should have scrambled most of those signatures. So my point is, to both call me emo, is there are inconsistencies that the evolutionist has no parsimonious explanation for. And to Erica, a good discriminatory line of evidence is function. And so the creation model would predict genome-wide functionality, and I would argue a strong case for that. Okay, I think I've addressed most of the counters: knockout tests, spurious transcription. They'll argue that the transcription factor binding is mostly just random. Okay, I've addressed most of that. But anyways, that's where the debate is. Does the genome comprise mostly junk DNA, evolutionary leftovers, genetic mistakes, the ancient remnants of past viral infections, or is what we see in the genome mostly representative of functionality? because then we're looking at nested hierarchies by design rather than descent. And so that's a way to discriminate between the models. Are the genomes of living organisms, specifically humans, mostly functional? If so, the most parsimonious explanation for that is creation. If the genomes of living organisms, again, let's specifically focus on humans, are mostly non-functional junk and representative of evolutionary leftovers, let's say somewhere less than 10% functionality in the genome, then the most parsimonious explanation for that observation may indeed be common descent. And so that's where the greater debate lies, is in the world of genetics and in the world of DNA function. And so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. And this has been fun. I appreciate all the comments, the support, the super chats, the feedback. Guys, we got a lot to look forward to as we come close to the end of the year. We want to wrap up this year with a bang. I think 2023 has so far been the best year on standing for truth. And I can tell you 2022 was excellent. 2021 was fantastic. And so we want to get better and better and better. And we want to put out more and more content for you that is edifying to the body of Christ. And that is even interesting to our favorite skeptic. So Doki Doki Bible Club says, fun stream. I appreciate it, my brother. God bless you. Great job moderating the live chat tonight, keeping things orderly and professional. And to our critics, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for stopping by and sending in your questions and challenges. And so with that, we are going to wrap things up. Share this around on Facebook. Share this around on YouTube. I want as many people as possible to see this comprehensive examination of the hominin fossil record. God bless all.